Bleach. Studying medicine can't save the spirit world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 401. Waves. Big waves. Expose him. Due to his hostile attitude, Haribal extinguished this thought the moment it came to his mind. On the contrary, Haribal instinctively obeyed Senju Cheng's words, exuding a terrifying spiritual pressure, staring at Senju Cheng as if he would continue to attack Senju Cheng at any time. Senju Cheng was not surprised by Haribal's reaction. In the 7 years of living in Karakura town, through the uninterrupted flower language letter communication with Unohana teacher, Senju Cheng knew the situation of Seireitei very well. But in Hukou Mundo, Senju Cheng has never completely ignored it. On the contrary, as a vast old-level Great Hollow, Synopsis can travel back and forth between Hukou Mundo and Karakura town at any time, so at the convenience of Synopsis, Senju Cheng also knows the situation of Hukou Mundo very well. Among them, Haribal, who originally followed Senju Cheng to attack Synopsis, fell into the depths of the desert with Synopsis when Senju Cheng was on the verge of perfecting the ultimate spirit body, and continued to move irregularly in the depths of the desert for decades. Haribal waited and searched for Senju Cheng for many years, and never gave up, until he was recruited by Senbon to join the Hunya Palace. However, the reason why Haribal joined the Hunya Palace was simpler and purer, just knowing that Cheng was actually the Naught among the 10 blades. Therefore, under Senbon's deception, Haribal came to the conclusion that the 10 blades were the forces established by Lord Ashura, and he had the obligation to maintain Lord Ashura's forces before Lord Ashura returned. Then, Haribal accepted the hollow face of the Horyoku, and with the level of Vast Old, he obtained the 3 ranking among the 10 blades. Therefore, Senju Cheng knew very well that in a sense, rather than saying that Haribal was loyal to Senbon, it would be better to say that he was loyal to his own identity, Cheng. Haribal's reaction also proved that Senju Cheng's judgment was correct. After suspecting the connection between Senju Cheng and Cheng, Haribal's part almost unconsciously moved from Senbon's side to Senju Cheng's body. Aizen-kun, it's a pity, Haribal's part is not crooked, but has always been straight from the beginning, Senju Cheng said secretly in his heart, but on the surface he was acting in accordance with the prepared script with extreme seriousness. Senju Cheng pulled the spirit bow again with both hands and aimed at Haribal, and asked, "What are you? Even if you were a hollow at the level of Vast Old, this level of strength is too exaggerated." This question was also transmitted to the captain meeting of the Seireitei at the same time, causing many captains to look at the synchronized screen with a little more solemnity. Among them, Senbon's expression was still so gentle and indifferent. Too naive, without even a little bit of inductive questioning skills, how could Haribal reveal important information? At this moment, Haribal in the picture slowly spoke. "Seireitei. I am both a hollow at the level of Vast Old and a hollow that has completed Seireitei. As the 3 among the 10 Espartas, it is not surprising that I have this level of power." Senbon. For a moment, even Senbon couldn't help but be stunned. The reason why Haribal was chosen as the leader to go to Karakura town was because Senbon knew very well that Haribal had a unique sense of identity with the 10 Espartas, and in a sense, he could even be regarded as the most reliable existence among the 10 Espartas. In addition, the belief that Haribal held when he was promoted to Vast Old was sacrifice. Therefore, even if Haribal was captured by the Seireitei, Senbon would think that Haribal was sacrificing himself, and he would definitely not sell the relevant information of the 10 Espartas to the god of death. Senju Cheng asked with a somewhat shocked expression. "The 10 Esparta? No. 3? So there are 2 stronger than you?" "Wrong. There are 3. Haribal's voice was decisive and faintly full of admiration, which was heard by many captains in the conference room. Among them, no. 1 and no. 2 are both Vast Old level says like me, but no. Lord Cheng is definitely of a different level. He is the true king of Hukou Mundo and has the power to easily destroy and create Hukou Mundo." In an instant, not to mention the expressions of many captains in the conference room, even Senju Cheng's face was a little confused from the bottom of his heart. "Wait, this is too much. When did I have the power to easily destroy and create Hukou Mundo?" Senju Cheng knew that he had disappeared in Hukomundo for decades, and Haribal had been waiting for his return, firmly believing that Cheng was just as he had said before, and perhaps he had fallen asleep again somewhere. However, what Senju Cheng did not expect was that his image in Haribal's mind had actually been revered to that extent. Although Haribal's answer was somewhat beyond Senju Cheng's expectations, the expressions of the captains in the captain's meeting room undoubtedly showed that the effect was much better than expected. There are 3 more monsters stronger than Haribal. Among them, the king of Hukomundo named Cheng actually has the power to easily destroy and create Hukomundo. The exposure of this information undoubtedly shocked all the captains, including Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni. Decades ago, the crisis of the Uchike's Hollows that almost destroyed the entire expeditionary corps is still vivid in their minds, and in that incident, there is still a mystery that has not been completely solved, that is, why such a large group of Uchike's Hollows did not have a Vostok-level hollow. Later, in the reenactment of the Seireitei, if a Vostok-level hollow participated in the attack on the expeditionary corps, perhaps the entire war would have a completely different outcome. Once the Seireitei completely destroyed the entire expeditionary corps, and the Hukomundo invaded the Soul Society, which was underpowered, the Seireitei might even be completely destroyed. Now, the information revealed by Haribal has undoubtedly caused a stir in the eyes of many captains, and it is a bigger wave than the previous expeditionary corps incident. At this moment, the threat of Kurosaki Makatao has become insignificant, and he has even become a fish whose value has increased in the storm. In an instant, the idea that Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni had more or less held on to let Haribal and Kurosaki Makatao lose both of them was completely extinguished, and he gave the order directly. Captain Kuchika, Captain Seireitei, and Captain Nirvana, take action immediately, and capture the 2 hollows at all costs. Chapter 402. The house was stolen. At the same time, when Haribal deliberately mentioned the name Cheng, he also paid close attention to all the micro-expressions of Senju Cheng. And with Senju Cheng's expression management ability that has reached the peak, how could Haribal see the slightest flaw? On the contrary, Senju Cheng's expression showed shock and horror. Then, Senju Cheng seemed to react and spoke with a gloomy face. Is Hukomundo so powerful? No, even if I have to cooperate with the gods of death, I must keep you. As Senju Cheng's voice fell, a bunch of spirit arrows burst out with bright light and shot towards Haribal. Swoosh, 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 the sound of tearing the air rang out harshly, and the spirit arrows arrived in front of Haribal in almost the blink of an eye, colliding with the bone sword. Boom, boom, boom. A huge cloud of smoke rose up with Haribal as the center, and the materialized aftermath spread wildly in a ring shape, which was enough to show that it was like a full-strength attack from Makatao Senju. Haribal, whose figure was shrouded in the smoke, was pierced through one shoulder and chest by a spirit arrow that he had no time to resist. However, Haribal knew very well that Makatao Senju was definitely letting him go. The injuries on his body looked horrible, but even the arrow that pierced his chest did not hurt any vital parts. As for those seemingly powerful spirit arrows, when they collided with the bone sword, the aftermath was amazing, but it did not have the power to threaten a Vostok-level hollow. This is a reminder. Haribal reacted instantly, and even understood that the wounds on his body were excuses that could be used to help him withdraw to Hukomundo. Who was this man, this queency named Kurosaki Makatao? Haribal's mind was completely occupied by this doubt. He quickly followed Senju Cheng's instructions and dragged his injured body out of the smoke and rushed towards Yamai on the other side. Don't try to escape, Haribal, watch out for the arrow. Senju Cheng saw this and seemed to be anxious. He shot another arrow in the direction of Haribal without hesitation. Swoosh! This arrow, under Senju Cheng's loud reminder, flew through the gap between the 2 peaks of Haribal, and then, bang! This arrow hit Yamai's knee. Ah! Yamai, who was still fighting with Ishirai, verified the terrifying power of this arrow at his knee. The whole knee was pierced instantly, and Yamai screamed in pain. At the same time, the 3 captains who had arrived at Kurakura town long ago, after receiving the order from the captain-in-chief, did not care that the barrier of the Kidmushu had not been truly completed, and almost simultaneously surrounded Haribal and Yamai from different directions. However, Haribal's eyes completely ignored the 3 captains, and still fell completely on Senju Cheng. After tapping the air with his hand to open the black cavity leading to Hukomundo, he spoke. Kurosaki Cheng, we will meet again. Then, amidst another spirit arrow from Senju Cheng and the attacks released by the other captains from afar, Haribal dragged the screaming Yamai into the black cavity. Boom! Just as the spirit arrow was about to hit Arable, the black cavity closed instantly and separated the two in different spaces. As for the other captains, they were even slower, and had no time to stop Arable and Yamai from leaving. Seeing this, Kinpachi Zaraki was dissatisfied and slashed at the surrounding ruins to vent his anger. Damn it. He ran away. He actually let my precious experiment run away like this. As for Kurosaki Mayuri, his fingers and expression moved in a twisted manner, his eyes fixed on Senju Makoto, and he said, "Quincy, you're responsible for this matter, understand? Otherwise, I will make you into an experiment as well." However, what responded to Kurosaki Mayuri was Senju Makoto's open spirit bow, and the spirit arrows condensed out of it emitted a brilliant brilliance, and he said calmly, "Captain Kurosaki Mayuri, have you forgotten the embarrassing escape back to Soul Society a few years ago? Your malicious statement makes me doubt your thoughts." In an instant, the scene seemed to become a little tense, and Ishidori instantly retreated to Senju Makoto's side and prepared for battle. Kurosaki Mayuri was about to take advantage of the situation and use this excuse to join forces with other captains to kill Senju Makoto. Kachika Byakuya, who had received the order from the Seireitei one step ahead, raised his hand to block Kurosaki Mayuri, and then spoke. "Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, thank you for protecting Karakura town this time. As the captain of the 6th Division, I would like to thank you on behalf of the Seireitei." Makoto Senju also fully maintained the image of the queency that he had shown to the Seireitei in the past, and replied with a relaxed attitude. "No need to thank me. In any case, our goal is to protect the real world. I just hope that you all understand that I am not a subordinate of the Seireitei," Byakuya Kachiki said with some kindness. "In any case, this time it is all thanks to Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, but the next things will be handled by the 13th Division of the Gotti." Upon hearing this, Makoto Senju naturally did not care about the glory and status of the queency, or the righteousness of protecting the real world. Therefore, Makoto Senju did not hesitate to hand over the troublesome aftermath of Karakura town to the 13th Division of the Gotti to handle. After all, this time the entire Karakura town was severely damaged in terms of buildings and casualties. I'm afraid that only the 13th Division of the Gotti could disguise all this as a normal natural disaster to avoid the panic of ordinary humans. Of course, Senju Makoto knew that it was probably not him who caused the trouble through Haribel and made the Seireitei realize the great threat from Huko Mundo. He was probably being beaten up by his former colleagues. For Senju Makoto, compared to breaking up with the Seireitei, his current focus is undoubtedly more on the development of devices, and he has developed a considerable interest in the Hojokyu. Perhaps, the power of the Hojokyu will have an effect on the development of devices ? Just as Senju Makoto ordered Ishidori to bring in Ryori time, and then return to the flower shop while thinking, it was quite unexpected that only Synopsis came to greet him. Then, Senju Makoto saw the shadow doll quietly placed on the side, seemingly asleep. Senju Makoto. Where is the rice cooker I just practiced? Almost in an instant, Senju Makoto understood, he who had stolen other people's homes for a lifetime, his home was stolen. Chapter 403 Economic Thief. In an instant, Senju Makoto's expression became much more nuclear. In the chaotic situation of the presence of a large number of hollows and Shinigami Ratsu in Karakura town, Senju Makoto could not accurately distinguish all the Ratsu. What's more, Senju Makoto was paying attention to Ichigo Kurosaki's situation on the one hand, and watching the movements in the meeting room of the captain of the Seireitei on the other hand, and was always fighting with Haribel. With the truly perfect Arensei transformed vast old-level Great Hollow Synopsis still guarding his home, Senju Makoto could never have imagined that Kurosaki Mayuri could steal his home quietly. What's going on? Where's Nirvana? Senju Makoto confirmed. Master, Nirvana left a message. The time working at the flower shop is over, and then he left the flower shop with the doll. Synopsis answered truthfully. Did Nirvana leave on his own initiative? Senju Makoto narrowed his eyes slightly, and turned to walk upstairs with the shadow doll, pushed open the door, and saw Nirvana's style of tidying up the room. Unlike Synopsis, who would try his best to accommodate Senju Makoto's habits and didn't care much about whether the room was neat or not, Nirvana, who was used to scientific research in the past, had a harsh habit and persistence in dealing with all kinds of details and neatness. Then, Senju Makoto put the shadow doll on the bed, picked up the cup of tea that was still steaming, and tasted it lightly. The residual heat was still there. Unfortunately, the captain-level Shinigami who stayed in Karakura town had left the world, which meant that Nirvana must have been taken back to the Seireitei. Did you really leave voluntarily? Senju Cheng tasted the faint bitterness and sweetness in the tea, and felt inexplicably unhappy in his heart. Even though Senju Cheng had once tricked Nian into becoming a clerk in the flower shop, he had clearly stated that Nian could leave the flower shop at any time by his own will, but this kind of leaving without saying goodbye. Even before leaving, he deliberately did all the last work he could do. Knock, knock. At this moment, the doors knocked gently, and Synopsis stood at the door respectfully and reported. Master, Seireitei and Seireitei have arrived. Let them wait first. Senju Cheng said, waved to Synopsis, and motioned Synopsis to go down, while picking up a dessert and putting it in his mouth. After tasting it a little, Senju Cheng frowned slightly and muttered, not sweet enough. However, despite this, Senju Cheng still swallowed the whole dessert. However, what surprised Senju Cheng was that Synopsis was still standing at the door. Anything else? Master, Synopsis said respectfully. I feel that the master's mood seems to be a little negative. Is there anything Synopsis can solve for the master? Yes. Senju Cheng said while continuing to taste the tea and dessert gracefully and unhurriedly. As a store manager with integrity and goodwill, a certain employee left as agreed, but I want him to continue working. Is there any reasonable excuse? Synopsis, who maintained the appearance of Remdol, tilted his head slightly and said, aren't the master's rules the most important rules? Does the master need any excuses? Senju Cheng paused and said, no, people can't be so shameless, at least I can't. Integrity is still needed, of course. More importantly, Senju Cheng knows his background very well. He is the vice captain of the 4th Division. If he is too shameless, his identity will be exposed later, which will ruin his image. Moreover, in front of Unohana teacher, holding high the banner of my rules are the rules, and then forcibly snatching the vice captain of the 12th Division back to the real world, what is the difference between that and social death? So, excuses are still needed. Back then, even Eagle Source at least put up washing powder as an excuse, so the banner of righteousness cannot be absent. Got it. Then, Synopsis seemed to remember something, took out a small notebook from his pocket, and said, Master, during the time when Nian worked in the flower shop, he caused a lot of flowers to be damaged and food to be wasted due to his own problems many times. In addition, the expenses for food, clothing, housing, transportation, etc. in the flower shop during this period, so even if the decimals are removed, Nian still owes the master 1349 million yen. Senju Cheng. At this moment, Senju Cheng's movements froze, and he asked subconsciously, is there so much? Yes, master, I remember every item clearly. As Synopsis said, he raised the small notebook in his hand with clear records. Pa. Immediately, Senju Cheng slammed the table and said angrily, fortunately it reminded me, otherwise I would not have noticed that Nian had worked in the flower shop for many years and had caused such a huge economic loss to the flower shop, but she ran away while I was away. It seems that I must bring Nian back to settle this account. Senju Cheng said as he drank the tea, then picked up the last piece of dessert, thought about it and chose to put it away. As for the fact that Senju Cheng has never paid Nian salary over the years, Senju Cheng naturally did not mention it. What? Didn't Nian work in the flower shop to repay her kindness? In this case, how could Nian have the nerve to talk to Senju Cheng about salary? On the contrary, Nian had unknowingly caused such a huge property loss to the flower shop over the years. This kind of economic thief must be brought back and punished. Then, Senju Cheng walked downstairs, only to see Seireitei, who was naked, and Seireitei, who had some concerns between her eyebrows, were already waiting in the flower shop. Teacher Kurosaki, something happened to Kurosaki-san and Kachiki-san. Seeing the appearance of Senju Cheng, Seireitei seemed to have found a backbone, and she kept talking about the situation of Kurosaki Ichigo and Kachiki Rukia. Of course, regarding the situation of Kurosaki Ichigo and Kachiki Rukia, Senju Cheng actually knew much more than Seireitei, who witnessed the whole process. However, what surprised Senju Cheng a little was the change in the way Seireitei addressed Kurosaki Ichigo. The address Kurosaki-san seemed much more distant than the address Ichigo-san. Is that so? As Seireitei finished speaking, Senju Cheng frowned slightly, as if he was a teacher who was a little worried. Kachiki-san was taken back to the Soul Society by the Shinigami, and Ichigo was seriously injured and lost his power as a Shinigami, and then was taken away by Urahara Kisuke. And Seireitei spoke at the right time. Uncle Kurosaki, Uehara Kisuke asked me to tell you that I hope you can go to Uehara's store to discuss something. Chapter 404. Benyu's information. Okay, I got it. Senju Makoto nodded, put on his white windbreaker again and walked out of the store, admonishing. Rick, alright, you guys stay in the flower shop tonight and don't leave. I'll go to Uehara's general store and come back. Yes, Kurosaki teacher or uncle. Senju Makoto then left the flower shop and headed straight for Uehara's general store. When Senju Makoto arrived, Uehara Kisuke and Seireitei were already waiting. Hey, Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, thank you for your help. Uehara Kisuke seemed to be in high spirits and greeted Senju Makoto, and then led Senju Makoto into the store and flattered him. Mr. Kurosaki Makoto was really exaggerated tonight. He was able to find such a powerful hollow to draw. I almost thought that the entire Karakura town would be destroyed because of this. Uehara Kisuke, there's no need to say those extra nonsense. Senju Makoto paused, glanced at Uehara Kisuke, and said. On the contrary, I haven't even settled accounts with you yet. Don't tell me you don't know why the hollow bait in Ishitarai's hand and the effect of the hollow bait are so exaggerated. In an instant, as Senju Makoto's face turned cold, Uehara Kisuke's expression also froze. It was an accident. An accident. Uehara Kisuke explained awkwardly. The appearance of those two hollows is absolutely nothing to do with me. After a pause, Uehara Kisuke's face straightened and said. And, I suspect that all this was done by Aizen Sasuke. I'm still investigating why he can command hollows of that level, but the main problem is that Kachika Rukia was brought back to the Seireitei earlier than expected. Yoichi has gone to Soul Society to investigate the situation, but we may have to prepare for the worst. Prepared for the worst? Senju Makoto asked. Uehara Kisuke nodded and spoke with a gloomy look. That means Aizen Sasuke has seen through my plan and confirmed in advance that the Hojoku in my hand is hidden in the body of Kachika Rukia. If that's the case, then it is very likely that Aizen Sasuke has already prepared a perfect countermeasure to secretly obtain the Hojoku in Kachika Rukia's body. Senju Makoto asked. What do you mean? Further confuse the water in the Seireitei, let the Seireitei directly enter the maximum combat readiness state, and then find a way to actively expose Aizen Sasuke's true face. At this point, Uehara Kisuke opened his small fan and said. In this case, naturally there must be a candidate who is both wise and brave, has superb combat power, has a long-term vision, and can keenly seize the opportunity that flashes by to sneak into. I refuse. Without waiting for Uehara Kisuke to finish, Senju Makoto refused without hesitation. Perhaps, Senju Makoto has already prepared to go to the Seireitei in his heart, but being used as a gun by Uehara Kisuke is another matter. It has always been Senju Makoto who has taken advantage of others for free, and Senju Makoto has never had the experience of being taken advantage of by others. It is impossible to let Senju Makoto lead the charge based on Uehara Kisuke's few words. Then, Senju Makoto refused with a perfect position and excuse. In the final analysis, this is all internal affairs among you Shinigami. As a queency, I am not interested. What's more, the so-called harm of the Hojoku is just your one-sided statement. How can I rashly sneak into the Soul Society because of this? In an instant, Uehara Kisuke was completely silent by Senju Makoto's words, and realized that Senju Makoto is completely different from the guy like Kurosaki Ichigo who can be fooled with a few words. Alas, I didn't expect that Mr. Kurosaki Makoto still doesn't trust me so much. Uehara Kisuke sighed, took out a stack of documents from his arms and handed them to Senju Makoto, saying, This is all my research data on the Hoyoku. All signs indicate that once the two Hoyoku are completely fused, the material they form will allow the Shinigami to completely break through the boundary between Shinigami and Hollows, and thus master power close to that of God, and with Aizen Sasuke's ambition and madness, his target is likely to be the Soul King. At the time, in order to go to the Soul King Palace, he is likely to choose to destroy the King Key of Karakura Town, which is the heavy spiritual land, to open the passage to the Soul King Palace. Once it reaches that point, I am afraid that not only will the Seireitei be doomed, but Karakura Town will also be unable to escape the fate of being destroyed. As Makoto Senju listened to Uehara Kisuke's far-sighted statement, his attention was undoubtedly more focused on the file on the Hoyoku in Uehara Kisuke's file. Perhaps because of his great trust in Makoto Senju, and in order to truly gain his trust, this file on the Hoyoku contains a lot of detailed content. The origin, composition, various experimental results, reaction results with various substances, and even some technologies developed based on the Hoyoku are all recorded on it. In Senju Makoto's opinion, this is undoubtedly the truly valuable thing on Urahara Kisuke's body. Senju Makoto's face showed an increasingly heavy look, but he kept recording the valuable information on it. In the past, Senju Makoto had the idea of possessing the Hojoku, but the real Hojoku needed to be fused with the Hojoku cultivated by Aizen Sasuke and Urahara Kisuke. Among them, the fusion of Hojoku must also involve a lot of experiments and problems, and it is not as simple as picking up two magnets on the road and automatically attracting each other. Therefore, even if Senju Makoto sees the Hojoku in advance, it would be meaningless. But now that Urahara Kisuke handed over all the information about the Hojoku in his hand, Senju Makoto's understanding of the Hojoku suddenly increased a lot. And as Senju Makoto turned to the last page of the document in his hand, the expression on his face seemed to be extremely heavy, as if he really understood how terrifying the Hojoku was. Senju Makoto took a long breath and said in shock, "Actually, it's really such a dangerous thing. Now Mr. Kurosaki Makoto understands that I often have no choice, right?" Urahara Kisuke said with some emotion. Senju Makoto said with some doubt, "It's just that I'm not familiar with the Seireitei, I'm afraid. Don't worry, before that, I will tell Mr. Kurosaki Makoto a lot of information about the Seireitei, and Mr. Kurosaki Makoto is not fighting alone. In addition to me and Yorishi, there may be another helper who can help a lot." As Urahara Kisuke said, he slowly opened the door behind him. Inside was Ichigo Kurosaki, whose injuries seemed to have completely stabilized. Ichigo has extremely terrifying potential hidden in his body. It's just how to guide Ichigo's potential. I believe that Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, who has trained Ishirai to this level, will not disappoint us. Chapter 405 Pre-War Preparation. As Makoto Senju left Urahara grocery store, Makoto Senju had already understood that Kisuke Urahara had great trust in the identity of Makoto Kurosaki, and revealed all his plans for the next step. Makoto Kurosaki led Ichigo Kurosaki and others to sneak into the Seireitei to act as a travel disaster to completely muddy the water. Kisuke Urahara and Yorishi Shifunyuan secretly coordinated and waited for an opportunity to expose the true face of Aizen Sasuke. If everything goes well, Kisuke Urahara will lead the masked army to return directly to the Seireitei at the right time as a fighting force to eliminate Aizen Sasuke. Among them, Kisuke Urahara did not forget to repeatedly remind Makoto Senju to be careful of Aizen Sasuke's mirror flower and water moon ability. However, Kisuke Urahara did not know that after getting the information about the Hinyu, Makoto Senju was thinking about how likely it was that if he took both Hinyu, how high the possibility was to merge them together by himself. Of course, on the surface, Makoto Senju showed almost no flaws. He took a long vacation at Kurakura Daiichi High School, and then began to prepare for going to the Seireitei. After learning that Makoto Senju was going to the Seireitei, Ishirai and Eleventh chose to go with Makoto Senju without hesitation. Moreover, in the eyes of Ishirai and Eleventh, Makoto Senju's image was once again tall and majestic. In order to save his students, he risked his life to go to the Soul Society. Makoto Senju, who had no idea how to explain this, agreed to their request considering the abilities of Ishirai and Eleventh. However, in order to deal with the possible situations in the Seireitei, Makoto Senju arranged a series of devilish special training for Ishirai, and also further developed in Eleventh. In addition, Senju Makoto also taught Eleventh how to call her father and hug her thighs. Eleventh's fighting ability is naturally not expected in the Seireitei, but as long as Eleventh remembers the good people who can be close to her in the Seireitei and the werewolves who should be kept away, she can almost completely guarantee her own safety. Among them, especially Unohana Retsu. Remember, this person. Senju Makoto picked up Unohana Retsu's photo and said seriously, "When you see her, don't think too much, just say my teacher is Kurosaki Makoto, and you will be safe in the Seireitei, understand?" After a pause, Senju Makoto did not forget to teach Eleventh how to implicitly and indirectly reveal to Unohana Retsu how much Senju Makoto has been concerned about and missed someone over the years. At the same time, Kurosaki Ichigo experienced a few days of confusion unique to middle school boys, and then under the guidance, deception, of Urahara Kisuke, he re-established his beliefs and goals. Then, almost just like the original trajectory, Urahara Kisuke successfully restored Kurosaki Ichigo's power of the god of death through a unique method when he was on the verge of becoming a hollow. Kurosaki Ichigo knocked the mask on his face with the handle of his broken zanpakutō, revealing the unique arrogance and self-confidence of a young boy, and said, "Get a hat, are you ready to be beaten up by me next?" Urahara Kisuke said slowly, covering half of his face with a small fan. Ichigo, don't be anxious. If you want to do combat training, I have found a teacher with rich teaching experience to teach you personally, teacher. Kurosaki Ichigo was stunned and asked. Who is the teacher? Mr. Wallantes. Where is he? At this moment, a familiar and gentle voice sounded behind Kurosaki Ichigo. Ichigo, I'm here. Ichigo Kurosaki turned his head and saw Senju Makoto in a white windbreaker. He was almost subconsciously startled. Ichigo Kurosaki asked blankly with his eyes wide open. Uncle Kurosaki, why are you here? Senju Makoto heard this and said helplessly. Ichigo, this question, you didn't even see who was fighting with Yami and Haribal that night? This, Ichigo Kurosaki scratched his head subconsciously and answered awkwardly. I was seriously injured at the time, and then I was taken away from the battlefield by that idiot Rukia, so why? When he said this, Ichigo Kurosaki paused and said in shock after realizing it belatedly. Wait, Uncle Kurosaki, that person, couldn't it be you? Senju Makoto held his forehead helplessly and turned his head to Urahara Kisuke and said. How about that? It's too difficult for such a slow-witted child to fight. No. However, before Urahara Kisuke could speak, Kurosaki Ichigo spoke firmly. I must go to Soul Society to rescue Rukia. How can I allow Rukia, that idiot, to act on her own? Oh, that's right, Urahara Kisuke, who was standing by, fanned the fire with his little fan and said, according to the information sent back from Soul Society, Kachika Rukia has been sentenced to death, and the time left for her execution is running out. If you want to rescue Rukia, Ichigo, you have to do it as soon as possible. As soon as he said this, it was as if he had given Kurosaki Ichigo a few injections of chicken blood on the spot, and he pointed at Senju Makoto and said. Makoto Kurosaki, come on, just treat me as a real enemy, and I may not lose to you. Before Ichigo Kurosaki finished speaking, Makoto Senju kicked Ichigo Kurosaki with a whip kick, sending him flying dozens of meters away, crashing into a large rock with a bang, causing smoke to rise. Then, Makoto Senju slowly retracted his foot and reminded him in a gentle tone. Ichigo, have you forgotten some basic manners? Can you call Makoto Kurosaki by his name? Pain, pain, pain. Ichigo Kurosaki, who was kicked into the rock, felt as if he was about to fall apart, and instinctively cried out in pain. And, the next moment, Makoto Senju appeared right above Ichigo Kurosaki, and his figure was clearly reflected in Ichigo Kurosaki's eyes, which had shrunk. A true enemy won't give you time to lie on the ground and wailing pain. As Senju Makoto finished his words, his long legs, which were extremely beautiful and powerful, swept across, directly kicking the entire huge rock to pieces, and swept towards Ichigo Kurosaki's head. The extreme crisis rushed to his nerves. Driven by instinct, Ichigo Kurosaki crossed his hands to block his head. However, even so, when the two sides collided, Ichigo Kurosaki still felt a black screen in front of his eyes, and the whole person was kicked out again uncontrollably. Chapter 406 Such a fragile thing. Bang! With a loud bang, Ichigo Kurosaki was kicked away again like a big sandbag. After falling to the ground, he continued to roll uncontrollably. When Ichigo Kurosaki's slightly darkened consciousness recovered, he instinctively thrust the half of the giant zanpakutō tightly held in his hand into the ground, and then barely maintained his balance. It was only then that Ichigo Kurosaki completely understood that some of his previous speculations about Makoto Senju were not illusions. Strong. Very strong. Although he could not feel the terrifying huge spiritual pressure from Makoto Senju, Ichigo Kurosaki felt that he did not have the slightest ability to resist in front of Makoto Senju. Not even a little bit. In fact, Ichigo Kurosaki vaguely felt that he was much more desperate and powerless in front of Makoto Senju than when he faced Yami and Byakuya Kachika. Can I really beat Makoto Kurosaki? For a moment, this thought emerged in Ichigo Kurosaki's consciousness, which was still a little dark from time to time. Ichigo, is this the extent of your determination? Senju Makoto, with his hands still in the pockets of his white windbreaker, stood tall on the broken boulder, and asked with a slightly stern look in his usually gentle eyes. What's with that look of shock and hesitation in your eyes? Is this the only belief you have in protecting the people you cherish? At this point, Senju Makoto seemed to speak with some disappointment. Ichigo, in my opinion, you don't seem to have made any progress since that rainy day 7 years ago. You are still the crybaby who can only cry and ask me for help. If that's the case, then I think the next combat training can end here. Ichigo, it's enough for you to go back to school. As for the Seireitei, I'll go there and try to help you rescue Rukia Kachake. As soon as these words came out, Ichigo Kurosaki's pupils shrank slightly unconsciously, and his mind recalled the memories hidden deep in his heart that he had almost forgotten unconsciously, the drizzle, the hollow, the seriously injured and unconscious mother, the strange man. What's going on? Such an important thing, why did I seem to have instinctively ignored it in the past? It turns out, I almost watched my mother die in front of me in the past, and I could only cry and ask for help. Now, Ichigo Kurosaki's fists clenched tightly unconsciously, and the complex and surging emotions made Ichigo Kurosaki's spiritual pressure fluctuate violently. Yurihara Kisuke, Gorites, and two grocery store employees Tsumage Ayu and Tanakari Jinta, who were watching the game on the sidelines, also had slightly changed looks in their eyes. Oh. This spiritual pressure, as expected of Mr. Kurosaki Makoto, you have stimulated Ichigo Kurosaki's faith so accurately. No way. Is Ichigo about to perform his Shikai? However, Makoto Senju seemed to be oblivious to the changes in Ichigo Kurosaki's spiritual pressure. Instead, he turned his back to Ichigo Kurosaki with a bit of disappointment, and said with a bit of helplessness. Ichigo, give up. The world is not as simple as you think. Even when I face the 13th Gotti squad, I am cautious and careful. What can you do when you go to the Seireitei when you can't even stop a few of my attacks? You should go home, go back to Misaki's arms and cry bitterly. Just think that your meeting with Rukia Kachake is just a dream of yours. There is not a single word of weakness in these words, but all of them are venomous words that fully illustrate the weakness and incompetence of Ichigo Kurosaki, almost like a needle piercing into Ichigo Kurosaki's heart. Wait, Ichigo Kurosaki slowly opened his mouth, only to feel that even his breathing seemed to be a little heavy and weak, and the sound he made seemed so weak and powerless. Makoto Senju, who was in sight, seemed not to hear it, and was still moving away step by step, as if he had unilaterally announced the end of this training, and also unilaterally announced the complete failure of Ichigo Kurosaki. The next moment, Kurosaki Ichigo's mind went blank, and he suddenly roared. I said, wait. Makoto Senju paused slightly, and his head tilted slightly towards Kurosaki Ichigo. Kurosaki Ichigo slowly stood up from the ground, staring at Makoto Senju's back with an unprecedented firm look, and said word by word. I don't know what I can do in the Seireitei, but I know that if I stay in the real world, I can't do anything for Rukia except crying. You can live. Makoto Senju stated an unusually cold and plain fact in a gentle tone. I want to live with Rukia Kachake. Why? The world will not accommodate willfulness. Makoto Senju said. Kurosaki Ichigo slowly raised the giant zanpakutō with only a small piece left in his hand and pointed it directly at Makoto Senju, saying, Just based on the bond between Rukia and me, just based on the power of the god of death that Rukia gave me. However, before Ichigo Kurosaki could finish, Makoto Senju appeared in front of him at a speed far beyond what he could detect, and gently placed 3 fingers on the broken giant zanpakutō in his hand. Then, before Ichigo Kurosaki could react, he gently pinched it. Bang! A crisp sound rang out, and the last bit of the blade of the seemingly exaggerated giant zanpakutō was completely broken, and Makoto Senju held it in front of Ichigo Kurosaki with 3 fingers, and asked calmly. The bond and the power of the god of death you mentioned are such fragile things? At this moment, Ichigo Kurosaki was almost subconsciously stunned. The zanpakutō was completely gone. Except for the lonely handle, all the blades were completely gone. Ichigo, when a person wants to fight, don't look for too many unnecessary excuses, such as ties or the power of others. Senju Makoto spoke slowly. Don't you think those are all excuses? Fighting is fighting. Carrying those so-called things will only make you dull, which has no meaning. From the beginning, Senju Makoto pinched the broken blade with 3 fingers and suddenly swung it towards Kurosaki Ichigo, and a sentence came into Kurosaki Ichigo's ears. It's not the blade that is fragile, but your heart. Are you really ready to fight? This question almost went straight to the soul, and with the blade approaching, Kurosaki Ichigo's heart trembled. Chapter 407. Cut the Moon. Am I really ready for the battle? At this moment, Ichigo Kurosaki felt as if time had slowed down, and his thoughts were fluctuating rapidly. From the moment he really came into contact with the power of the god of death, Ichigo Kurosaki was forced to accept it. After that, he continued to fight with the Hollows and was forced to protect Kurakura town. It can be said that since Ichigo Kurosaki became a god of death, he was forced to fight almost all the battles. Even now, when he stood in front of Makoto Senju, he was also pushed to do so. The purpose was to go to the Seireitei to save Rukia Kachaka, but are you really ready for the battle? From the bottom of your heart, accept the existence of the battle with your own beliefs, and then accept the world that is completely different from your daily life. The blade is still approaching, as if it is a countdown clock that keeps asking Ichigo Kurosaki for the answer. Hesitation, there is no time to hesitate. Are you really ready? Yes or no? Yes. No. Yes. At this moment, Ichigo Kurosaki's eyes were completely firm, and he instinctively made the choice in his heart. At this moment, a voice that Ichigo Kurosaki had felt seemed hazy and occasionally sounded since the battle with Yamai suddenly became extremely clear. Ichigo, you can finally hear clearly, your growth is unexpected, without a trace of confusion, forgetting fear. From Ichigo Kurosaki's perspective, the figure of Uncle Zanjitsu slowly emerged behind him, and his voice full of magnetism and power was speaking. In this case, look ahead, move forward, and don't stop. Remember that retreat will only age, and cowardice will inevitably lead to death. Shout out, my name is, when Uncle Zanjitsu, who was wearing sunglasses and a black robe covering his whole body, said this, his eyes accidentally glanced at Makoto Senju. Makoto Senju's eyes slowly turned slightly, and he looked from the direction of Ichigo Kurosaki's eyes to the part above Ichigo Kurosaki's shoulders that seemed to be empty. However, Uncle Zanjitsu happened to be speaking close to Kurosaki Ichigo's ear, and Senju Makoto's eyes seemed to see something and observe something, which made Uncle Zanjitsu's pupils shrink. What's wrong with this guy's sight? Can he see my existence directly with his naked eyes? How is it possible? However, in an emergency, seeing that Senju Makoto seemed to have no intention of stopping the broken blade that he was swinging towards Kurosaki Ichigo, Uncle Zanjitsu's voice sounded in Kurosaki Ichigo's ears after a slight pause. Zanjitsu. Kurosaki Ichigo instinctively shouted loudly, and his spiritual pressure suddenly soared a lot. In the state of just opening the first release, it completely surpassed the level of the chief officer and approached the level of the highest-ranking vice captain. And the handle of the sword held by Kurosaki Ichigo instantly extended a blade with an exaggerated arc, and swung towards the broken blade held by Senju Makoto. Bang! As the broken blade was chopped into pieces by Kurosaki Ichigo, it seemed to represent that Kurosaki Ichigo had completely cut off the confused and hesitant self in the past. Kurosaki Ichigo, holding a brand new zanpakutō, appeared in front of everyone. The huge blade, which looked like a kitchen knife, seemed to have no guard at all. The simple handle was wrapped with a simple white cloth. The style was exaggerated but simple. Yo! Kurosaki Ichigo raised the zanjitsu in his hand and pointed it directly at Senju Makoto, and said proudly. In that case, then I can just use my own strength, right? Interesting, Senju Makoto raised his eyebrows and said with a playful smile. Uncle Kurosaki, you have to be careful with the next attack. Even if it's you, I will never let you go. Kurosaki Ichigo spoke slowly, holding zanjitsu tightly with both hands and raising it above his head. The spiritual pressure of his whole body almost instinctively gathered towards zanjitsu. Getsuga Tensho. This posture made Makoto Senju instinctively think of the signature moves in the original trajectory, and the spiritual pressure changes on Ichigo Kurosaki were also in this trend. However, looking at Ichigo Kurosaki's reaction, this was more like an instinctive behavior. After the initial release of zanjitsu, the sudden expansion of spiritual pressure made Ichigo Kurosaki instinctively choose to completely burst out the spiritual pressure in his body in this way, even though he had not really learned Getsuga Tensho. The next moment, with the zanjitsu in Ichigo Kurosaki's hand falling, the violent high-density slashes rolled towards Makoto Senju like a wave. There is no doubt that even if the vice-captain-level Shinigami did not arrive and took this blow head-on, he might directly lose his combat ability. Unfortunately, standing in front of Ichigo Kurosaki was Makoto Senju. As Makoto Senju pointed his finger in front of him, a spirit shield commonly used by queens whose condensed and blocked the front. Boom! A huge roar sounded, and the rolling high-density slashes hit the seemingly thin and fragile spirit shield, but it instantly collapsed and disintegrated, as if it could not stir up the slightest wave. This scene also shocked Ichigo Kurosaki, who instinctively released himself in one breath and was about to fall asleep due to exhaustion. Ichigo Kurosaki. In Ichigo Kurosaki's shocked eyes, Makoto Senju gently knocked on the spirit shield in front of him with his hand, and the spirit shield shattered with a sound, and he spoke. Ichigo, you don't think that the so-called battle is to release all the spiritual pressure in one breath and it's over, right? A protracted battle, squeezing yourself one after another, and constantly surpassing the limit is the real battle of a man. The next moment, a spirit bow appeared in Makoto Senju's hand, and he aimed at Ichigo Kurosaki and slowly pulled it open, and said in a calm tone that made Ichigo Kurosaki's hair stand on end. Now that you have your own zanpakutō, let's start the battle training. I will continue to release spirit arrows at you. You can try to dodge with your slow speed, but I suggest you release the same slash again to offset it, rather than just blocking with the blade of your zanpakutō. Otherwise, I'm not sure if your zanpakutō will be damaged and broken again, and if your spirit body is hit head-on, it is likely to die. As Senju Makoto's voice fell, a bright light flashed on the spirit bow, and when Ichigo Kurosaki reacted, the spirit arrow had already arrived in front of him. Dodge. There was no time at all. Ichigo Kurosaki, who was already quite exhausted, instinctively blocked the blade of his zanpakutō zanjutsu horizontally, but the huge impact force almost broke Ichigo Kurosaki's entire body. However, before Ichigo Kurosaki could catch his breath, two more spirit arrows appeared in front of him at the same time. Ichigo Kurosaki. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 408. The Awareness of Death. A few days later. After a series of training that made Kurosaki Ichigo's originally resolute eyes seem to be covered with a layer of gloom, and the two young clerks of Urahara General Store, Tsumage Ayama and Hanakari Jinta, looked at Senju Makoto and subconsciously lowered their heads and hurried away. Kurosaki Ichigo, who was rarely allowed some free time to say goodbye to his family and friends, returned to the underground space again, and two figures that were beyond Kurosaki Ichigo's expectations appeared in front of him. Seireitei, who was dressed in a white Queen's combat uniform and had 7 tops specially prepared in his bag on his back, and Seireitei, who was wearing a flower shop clerk's uniform and carrying an oversized luggage bag on her back, making the ravine on her chest more obvious. Ishida-san? Inoue-san? Why are you here? Kurosaki Ichigo asked in shock. Seireitei greeted him warmly and brilliantly, and answered. Kurosaki-san, I've also heard about Kachiki-san's story. I've decided to go to the Seireitei with Kurosaki-sensei to save Kachiki-sensei. Seireitei pushed his glasses and said. As a queency, I want to go to Soul Society to see it. You guys, seeing this, Ichigo Kurosaki's expression revealed a hint of emotion, but he still subconsciously refused. No, the danger level of the Seireitei is far beyond your imagination. Don't worry, Kurosaki-san, I have been practicing hard under the guidance of Kurosaki-sensei. Seireitei answered with full energy. Seireitei glanced at Ichigo Kurosaki and said. Instead of worrying about me, you might as well think about how to avoid being a burden to Uncle Kurosaki. In an instant, after being hit by Seireitei's harsh words, Ichigo Kurosaki immediately felt that his emotion was not as good as feeding it to the dog. Asshole, do you think I'm still the same as before? Oh? I don't see much difference. Instead, I look like I've been squeezed dry and overdrawn. I have to worry about your kidney function. After a pause, Seireitei, who was already quite sharp-tongued, became even more ruthless after being influenced by Senju Makoto for several years. The small clinic in your home is not very good. You can go to my hospital to check your kidney function when you have time. I can give you a 10% discount on kidney dialysis. Ichigo Kurosaki, who was a little tongue-tied, said angrily. What are you talking about, asshole? There is nothing wrong with my kidneys. Seireitei pushed his glasses and seemed to analyze rationally. It seems that it's not just the kidney function that's problematic, but also the problem of being stubborn. When I have time, I'll put the spirit bow in your mouth and shoot you. Come on, I'll chop you down now. Ishida-san, Kurosaki-san, you, just as Seireitei and Kurosaki Ichigo seemed to be getting more and more passionate and harmonious, and Seireitei was anxious to ease the atmosphere, Senju Makoto and Urahara Kisuke walked over side by side. Oh, the three of you seem to be in a good mood, and you don't feel nervous at all. That's great. Urahara Kisuke said jokingly. Kurosaki Makatao, who was still wearing the white windbreaker, spoke up. Let's stop getting familiar with each other. It's almost time to set off. In an instant, the expressions of Kurosaki Ichigo, Ishirai and Inorai all became more solemn and nodded seriously. For them, the Soul Society undoubtedly represents unknown dangers, and there are unpredictable and terrible enemies everywhere. Senju Makatao looked at their faces, which seemed to be determined to die and never return, and smiled gently, saying, You just need to do your best to do your own things at the time, and don't worry about anything else. I will take care of everything. As a teacher, protecting your students is an important responsibility that cannot be shirked. Under Senju Makatao's contagious smile, Kurosaki Ichigo and others couldn't help but relax a little and answered in unison. Yes, Kurosaki teacher or uncle. Just at this time, a big hole was suddenly torn in the air of the underground space, and there seemed to be darkness that could not be seen at the end. Urahara Kisuke, who was maintaining the passage on one side, waved to Kurosaki Makatao and said, Mr. Kurosaki Makatao, then the affairs of the Soul Society will be left to you, yes. Senju Makatao responded and took the lead and jumping into the big hole in the air, followed by Kurosaki Ichigo and others. After a brief blackout, when Ichigo, Kurosaki and the others came to their senses, they were already in a rather strange space, surrounded by darkness, and something seemed to be surging. Follow me, Senju Makatao said as he led the way. This is the Dangai, a place between the real world and the Soul Society where a large number of severed spaces and time currents are stacked on top of each other. Remember to follow me closely, otherwise if you get lost here, you may never be able to return to the real world. In an instant, the expressions of Ichigo, Kurosaki and the others could not help but tense up a little, and they hurriedly caught up with Makatao Senju and ran in a certain direction. However, due to the presence of Orai Minue, the speed of the entire team was not very fast, and Ichigo Kurosaki seemed to have thought of something and asked. Uncle Kurosaki, have you ever been to Soul Society? Why do you know so much about Dangai? Soul Society is a world where countless human souls and Shinigami live after death. Your uncle Kurosaki is still alive, how could he have been to Soul Society? Senju Makatao said in a somewhat annoyed tone, and then explained. Most of this information I got from Urahara Kisuke, and there are some points about the GOTY 13 that must be remembered. Then, Senju Makatao gestured to Inorai. While trying to keep up with the team, Inorai hurriedly took out a few pieces of paper from the side of the bag behind her and handed them to Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishirai respectively. Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishirai looked at the contents of the papers in the weak light, and there was a table on it. Uncle Kurosaki, what is this? Information about Shinigami at the level of captain of the GOTY 13. Of course, this is also compiled from the information obtained from Urahara Kisuke. Senju Makatao explained, and then continued. Captains are completely different from each other. Sometimes, the level gap between captains is even greater than the gap between ordinary captains and ordinary death gods. So this information is to prevent you from messing with those who really shouldn't be messed with. Chapter 409. Captain Without Threat. Ishirai and Kurosaki Ichigo were shocked when they heard this, and they quickly looked at the contents on the file. Unless they were pure and reckless men like King Puchizaki, any normal person would understand the importance of intelligence. In addition to the general layout of the Seireitei, the responsibilities of different divisions of the GOTY 13, and the general description of other organizations, the most important thing on the file was undoubtedly the table that listed the captains of the GOTY 13. The names, appearance characteristics, simple evaluations, and the simplest threat star ratings of each captain were marked, and the threat star ratings ranged from 1 star to 5 stars. Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishirai quickly glanced at the captains corresponding to different star ratings. 1-star representative captain, Komamura Sujin. 2-star representative captain, Hitsuge Itrashiro. 3-star representative captain, Kachaki Byakuya. 4-star representative captain, Kakushansui. 5-star representative captain, Yamamoto Janraisai Shijakuni, and Senju Makatao continued to simply remind them. For the 1-star and 2-star ones, you can try to deal with them head-on. The 3-star ones are generally beyond your current scope of handling. When you meet the 4-star captains, you'd better be a little obedient and shout for help. Don't try to provoke them. After a pause, Senju Makatao stroked his chin and said, if you're unlucky enough to meet the 5-star captains, you only need to remember one thing. What is it? Kurosaki Ichigo asked. Senju Cheng turned around and showed a gentle smile, raised a finger and said, "Don't say you know me, and don't reveal any information about me. That's all." In an instant, the expressions of Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishirai were both frozen, and the corners of their mouths couldn't help twitching. I didn't expect that Senju Cheng, who was usually gentle and always quite serious, had such a side. However, Senju Cheng's reaction was enough to show what kind of monsters those captains who were threatening to the 5-star level were. Ishirai said with some doubt, then pointed to the name Unohana Retsu on the file and asked, "Uncle Kurosaki, why doesn't this captain have a star rating?" "Oh, Makoto," Senju replied without looking back. "The 4th division is the healing division. All the members of the division are gentle and kind people who are not good at fighting. Captain Unohana, the captain of the 4th division, is also a famous kind person in Soul Society. So as long as you don't do anything to the 4th division, the threat level will be fine." "I see." Ishirai and Kurosaki Ichigo nodded, and completely understood what Makoto Senju meant. Only Inoue, who was at the end of the team, had a strange expression. After all, that was not what Makoto Senju said when he gave her private lessons before. In fact, the general source of information about all the contents of this document is indeed Uehara Kisuke. Under the circumstances that the information provided by Uehara Kisuke did not reveal the terrifying degree of Unohana teacher, Makoto Senju couldn't just mark it with 5 stars, right? Instead of marking low stars for Unohana, Makoto Senju might as well leave it blank, so as to avoid making Ishirai and Kurosaki Ichigo feel like they're a soft persimmon and tease her, and then be torn into 18 pieces and made into medical specimens. Moreover, Makoto Senju's reminder is completely correct. As long as you don't deliberately provoke Unohana, it's okay. After all, Unohana is a gentle and kind person. After Makoto Senju's series of explanations, Ichigo, Kurosaki and Ishirai also completely understood the importance of the document in their hands. While following Makoto Senju in the Broken World, they quickly memorized the contents on it. At this moment, Makoto Senju's eyes condensed and he looked back suddenly, a wave of black shadows appeared in the back and rushed towards the direction of Makoto Senju and his party, and the yellow eyes at the top emitted a terrifying light. "What is that?" Inoue, who was at the back of the team, asked curiously. "Kutu," Senju Makoto said quickly, and then said, "This thing is basically a scavenger that can devour everything in the Dangai. There is no time to explain too much in detail. Teacher is going to speed up." As soon as Senju Makoto finished speaking, Inoue felt a flash in front of her eyes, and Senju Makoto had appeared beside her, and then with both hands, he picked up Inoue in a princess hug in front of Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishirai. Inoue exclaimed, and then she understood what Senju Makoto meant by speeding up. In an instant, Inoue felt that everything around her was moving backwards quickly, and the speed almost reached a level that she could not imagine in the past. So fast, just based on the speed of Senju Makoto's movement, the wind pressure made Inoue feel that it was difficult to open her eyes, and her whole head subconsciously curled up and buried in Senju Makoto's arms. In Senju Makoto's feeling, he inexplicably had a feeling that there were 3 round things pressing against him. However, Senju Makoto turned his head to look at the rapidly approaching Juju, and did not bother to pay attention to these details. He took Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishirai and ran quickly towards the exit to Soul Society. Juju. This special existence in the Dankai may not be able to really threaten Senju Makoto, but once Kurosaki Ichigo or Ishirai is swallowed, even Senju Makoto will find it difficult to ensure that he can rescue them 100%. Fortunately, the real speed of Ishirai and Kurosaki Ichigo is not comparable to that of ordinary Shinigami. Without the drag of Inoue, who is still considered an ordinary human, the overall speed of the team can be said to have increased several times. Soon, as Senju Makoto rushed out of the bright exit with Inoue in his arms, Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishirai also followed closely and left the Dankai. What I saw seemed to be a familiar blue sky, as Makoto Senju and his party continued to fall in the air, compared to Ichigo, Kurosaki and others who looked at the Rukongai below at some surprise. Makoto Senju's eyes flashed with some nostalgia. Soul Society, I haven't been back for decades. And the moment Makoto Senju appeared in Soul Society, the endless spirit particles that made up the basic material of the entire Soul Society seemed to be faintly excited, as if they were welcoming their king. It's really a completely different feeling from before. Makoto Senju felt the leaping of the spirit particles around him, as if they would follow his thoughts if they moved within the range covered by his thoughts. Chapter 410 I am the travel disaster. Relatively speaking, although there is no shortage of spirit particles in Karakura town, which is a heavy spiritual land, the difference in the amount of spirit particles compared to Soul Society is no different from the difference between a stream and the sea. Among them, in addition to Senju Makoto, is Seireitei, who is a queency who absorbs spirit particles to fight, also feels quite obvious. In a sense, being in Soul Society, the queency is almost like having endless ammunition to use, and absorbing spirit particles has become much easier than in the real world. Bang! In the end, as Senju Makoto landed lightly holding in Seireitei, Seireitei also absorbed spirit particles through the flying kick and landed steadily on the ground, while Kurosaki Ichigo sat down heavily on the ground, stirring up a large cloud of smoke. What an idiot! Even as a Shinigami, you should at least master some basic skills to compress the spirit particles under your feet through spiritual pressure to form a short-term foothold, right? Seireitei almost mocked Kurosaki Ichigo without hesitation and said, "You are lucky enough to have been taught by Uncle Kurosaki for several days, but you have only improved to this extent." When Ichigo Kurosaki heard this and was about to retort, he suddenly thought of something and stood up and said, "Hey, you are not jealous, are you?" "No way. You are jealous because Uncle Kurosaki has been teaching me almost all the time during this period, so you can only practice alone?" Suddenly, Seireitei seemed to have been poked at some unspeakable weakness, and the veins on his forehead could not stop bulging, and he said angrily, "Who wouldn't be jealous of a fool like you? Ah, did you get it?" Suddenly, Seireitei and Ichigo Kurosaki had just set foot in Soul Society, but they were still in the mood to confront each other. This made Makoto Senju feel that it would be easier if he didn't have a brain. If it was Makoto Senju, he would probably be eager to hide and collect information, and use everything around him to confirm the next plan of action. However, Makoto Senju gently put Seireitei down from his arms, and his expression was also not the slightest bit nervous, and he was calmly concerned about Seireitei's condition. As for nervousness, what's there to be nervous about? For Makoto Senju, returning to Soul Society is almost like returning home. Then, Makoto Senju simply identified the surroundings and confirmed that he was probably in the vicinity of West 1st District of Rukongei. And with the monitoring strength of the surrounding streets by the Seireitei, it is likely that they have already known about their existence as traveling disasters. Traveling disasters. In Soul Society, they are regarded as the culprits of disasters, and they come to Soul Society without the guidance of the gods of death. I just don't know how efficient the Seireitei is now. How long would it take for the subjugation team to encircle and capture the traveling disasters? Makoto Senju thought secretly, turned to Kurosaki Ichigo and others, and explained as he walked towards the Seireitei. Remember that our main goal is to rescue Rukia Kachika, so all actions must be conducted in a secret, fast, and accurate manner, avoiding unnecessary battles as much as possible and protecting ourselves, understand? Yes. Only at this time did Ichigo Kurosaki and the others seem to have realized something belatedly and turned to ask, "Uncle Kurosaki, what should we do next?" "Of course, we should enter the Seireitei. If we can't even enter the Seireitei, then everything is just empty talk," Senju Makoto said. Suddenly, Seireitei frowned, recalling the contents of the files he browsed in the Broken World, and said in a serious tone, "Once an abnormal existence approaches the Seireitei, a wall made of murderous stones will immediately fall down around it, and the whole thing will be surrounded by soul-blocking membranes." After a pause, Seireitei asked, "Uncle Kurosaki, are we going to pretend to be members of the GOTY 13 to sneak in? Do you think it's possible?" Senju Makoto said speechlessly. Even if the gate guards of the various gates of the Seireitei were all blind, they would not be able to distinguish the difference in the spiritual pressure fluctuations of humans, queensies, and Shinigami. Moreover, our presence that openly breaks into the Seireitei would be called a traveling disaster, and the Seireitei would immediately discover our presence. Don't really imagine the GOTY 13 to be too incompetent. To the GOTY 13, we are not rats that sneaked into Soul Society secretly, but a group of fireflies that are a bit eye-catching. In an instant, the expressions of Ichigo Kurosaki, Ryashida, and Seireitei became more solemn, and they completely understood how urgent and dangerous their situation was. "Kurosaki-sensei, how can we get into the Seireitei to rescue Kachika-san?" Seireitei asked nervously. Just as Senju Makoto was about to answer, the group seemed to have passed a certain range. The empty ground in front of them suddenly had huge murderous stones falling from the sky. Boom, boom, boom. In the series of huge noises, a huge wall appeared out of thin air in front of Ichigo Kurosaki and other shocked eyes. Finally, a being that was as huge as Killian fell heavily to the ground, holding two axes and posing a heroic posture, and shouted loudly. Stop, the White Road Gate is guarded by the heroes of the gate, Ikansakashi Danbo, and you are not allowed to pass through. Seeing this, Senju Makoto smiled at Ichigo Kurosaki and others who had become a little like a frightened bird. This is one of the ways to enter, just break through by force. Ah. But didn't Mr. Kurosaki just say that we should avoid unnecessary battles as much as possible? In a way, or I'm asked weakly. Makoto Senju put his hands in the pockets of his white coat and said calmly. Avoiding unnecessary battles is not the same as not fighting. There is no way to rescue Rukia Kachiki without any battle. Heck, as I understand. Kurosaki Ichigo seemed to be excited when he heard this, and pounded his hands together and said. In short, just defeat this guy in front of you, and then rescue Rukia along the shortest way, right? If you can do it, Makoto Senju said without comment, but before Makoto Senju finished speaking, Kurosaki Ichigo couldn't wait to rush towards Ikansakashi Danbo and shouted loudly. Big guy, get out of my way, otherwise don't blame me for being rude. Makoto Senju looked at Kurosaki Ichigo's back helplessly, and in his mind he recalled the spiritual pressure he felt at the moment before the murderous stone fell. It's not you who is waiting behind the White Road Gate, right? Aizen-kun. P.S. I was busy going out today, so there are only 2 updates, sorry. Chapter 411 Crescent Moon, Tiangchong. At the same time. When Ichigo Kurosaki and Ikansakashi Danbo started fighting, many squads in the entire Seireitei also received news about the appearance of the traveling disaster. Traveling disasters are not unfamiliar to Seireitei, and the disasters they cause can always be large or small. Generally speaking, if there is no confirmation that the traveling disaster poses a great threat, the traveling disaster will generally be handled by a few specific squads. Relatively speaking, it was the direction of the White Road Gate that dropped the murderous stone, indicating that an unknown existence was trying to force its way into Seireitei, which made many Shinigami curious. In the courtyard of the 4th Squad's barracks with an ancient cherry tree like a canopy, Unohana slowly opened his eyes, his gentle and elegant eyes flickered slightly, and then stood up. Captain, what's wrong? Seeing this, the 4th Squad's 4th seed, Tora Tetsuya, asked in confusion. After all, for Unohana, when he was creating flower arrangements, unless there was an emergency, Unohana would calmly finish the flower arrangement in his hand. It was undoubtedly quite rare for Unohana to put down his flower arrangement halfway. Unohana picked up the zanpakutō placed beside him, gently covered his chest with one hand, and said softly. When you are still, you'll think about moving. Yuin, please accompany me for a walk. Yes, Captain. To Unohana request, Kotetsuya naturally would not object, and quickly stood up and followed Unohana to the outside of the courtyard. Unohana left the courtyard, and his eyes involuntarily looked towards the direction of the White Gate and the murderous stone that fell. At this moment, outside the White Gate. Senbon Festival. Ikansakashi Danbo, a well-known hero in Rukongei, swung the giant axe in his hand and smashed it towards the relatively small Kurosaki Ichigo in front of him. The violent might seemed to crush Ichigo Kurosaki into a pulp. This was also the agreement between Ichigo Kurosaki and Shidanbo Ikansaka. If Ichigo Kurosaki wanted Shidanbo Ikansaka to voluntarily open the White Road Gate, he had to defeat him. In this scene, except for Orai Miname who looked a little worried, the expressions of Senju Makoto and Seireitei hardly changed at all. Shidanbo Ikansaka. His huge and burly body gave him brute force far beyond that of ordinary Shinigami. If Shidanbo Ikansaka could not awaken his zanpakutō, his terrifying brute force might be enough to fight Jillian, but it was obviously not enough when facing a real strong man. Ichigo Kurosaki held his zanpakutō zanjutsu, which looked like a big kitchen knife, horizontally above his head with one hand, and collided with Shidanbo Ikansaka's giant axe, making a sharp and huge collision sound. Boom. However, what made Ikansakashi Danfan feel incredible was that even though his arm was numb, the tiny figure remained motionless, as if it had not been hit at all. Hey! Ichigo Kurosaki suddenly raised his head, his brown pupils seemed to be flashing with some kind of excitement, and he spoke to Ikansakashi Danfan. Is it just this extent? Now it's only this strength, but it can't even reach the power of the man's casual whip kick. What? Icon Sakashi Danfan said angrily. Although Icon Sakashi Danfan didn't know who Ichigo Kurosaki was comparing him with, that relaxed tone undoubtedly expressed contempt for him. Not even the power of a whip kick? You little brat, do you know who you are looking down on? I'm the great hero Icon Sakashi Danbo. Icon Sakashi Danbo roared loudly, and the huge axe pressing on his zanpakutō zanjutsu was raised. Icon Sakashi Danbo's arms, which were holding the two axes high, grew visibly larger. His robe-like muscles even bounced off the armor on his shoulders. Die, little brat. Long live Shidandahiri. As Icon Sakashi Danbo roared, the two huge axes tore through the air and fell towards Ichigo Kurosaki in front of him. The violent wave seemed to have poured all of Icon Sakashi Danbo's strength. The light in Ichigo Kurosaki's eyes became more and more obvious, and his hand holding his zanpakutō zanjutsu tightened a little. After being abused and exploited by Senju Cheng for a period of time, Ichigo Kurosaki had lost his judgment of his own strengths and weaknesses. He only knew that he could easily defeat 10 of his past selves. However, if he looked at the entire Seireitei and let me use you as a test. Ichigo Kurosaki's heart was warmed, and the zanpakutō zanjutsu in his hand formed an arc with an almost instinctive movement, and slashed at the double axes falling from above. Crescent Moon, Sky Rush. In an instant, as the traces of zanpakutō zanjutsu passed through the air, the spiritual pressure that erupted from Ichigo Kurosaki formed a high-density spiritual pressure slashing wave on the blade. The blue light, like a crescent moon, rushed straight into the sky. Boom. With a loud noise, Icon Sakashi Danbo felt that the double axes in his hands seemed to suddenly lighten. After the blue slashing wave dissipated, Icon Sakashi Danbo, with his eyes wide open, stared at the only remaining axe handle in his hand for a while. This brat, Icon Sakashi Danbo looked at Kurosaki Ichigo and was shocked. He also realized that Kurosaki Ichigo had shown mercy to him. Otherwise, if he had struck at his vitals, he would have died. Hey, brat, what's your name? Kurosaki Ichigo. Kurosaki Ichigo, you're a real strong man. I will abide by the agreement and open the door to the Seireitei for you, but there is one thing I have to remind you, Icon Sakashi Danbo reminded him in a serious tone. There are many monsters in the Seireitei that are much more terrifying than me. If you give up the idea of breaking into the Seireitei now, it may not be too late. Kurosaki Ichigo answered without hesitation. No, I want to went to the Seireitei and rescue Kachiki Rukia. Kachiki Rukia? Icon Sakashi Danbo was startled. Recalling the rumors that had been making a lot of noise recently, he realized something and smiled vaguely. I didn't expect you, little brat, to be a hero. Then, Icon Sakashi Danbo turned and walked to the wide gate, and with an amazing burst of brute force, he lifted up the wide gate made of the murderous stone that could isolate spiritual power and spiritual pressure. The legendary scenery of the Seireitei Garden also slowly appeared in front of Kurosaki Ichigo and others. Chapter 412 I said it. It was completely different from the seemingly messy and simple environment of Rukongai, solemn and gorgeous, neat and solemn. With white as the main color, yellow roofs as embellishments, and green plants everywhere, it seemed to be the center of the world under the sky. Suddenly, the pupils of Ichigo Kurosaki, Ryashida, and Ori Imanue all shrank, staring at the figure standing behind the slowly rising white road gate. The figure wearing the captain's Aori. The brown short hair seemed a little messy, wearing a pair of thick black-framed glasses, a wide captain's road covering his body, and a gentle and elegant smile on his face. Aiden Sosok. This name flashed through the minds of Ichigo Kurosaki and others in an instant, and then trembled wildly for it. Because, in the documents given to them by Makoto Senju, there were only 2 captains with a threat level of 5 stars, except for Captain General Yamamoto Seireitei Shibukuni, who was described in the profile as the strongest death god in 1,000 years. It was the Aizen Sosok in front of him, and the introduction and advice items were just a very simple sentence. Don't look directly at him. Run away. When Ichigo Kurosaki and others couldn't help showing a look of fear on their faces, Aiden Sosok seemed to have seen a cute kid next door, and raised his hand to greet him like a gentle and elegant uncle. Hey. Good morning, young people from the travel disaster. What a coincidence, I didn't expect to meet you here by accident. As Aiden Sosok's voice rang out, Icon Sakashi Danbo, who was struggling to slowly lift up the white road gate, subconsciously looked down at Aiden Sosok with fear and guilt. Aiden Sosok seemed to feel Icon Sakashi Danbo's fear and guilt, and said gently and considerately. Don't worry, I won't punish you. I heard the whole thing clearly behind the white gate. As the loser, it is necessary to abide by the agreement. Icon-saka Shidanfan breathed a sigh of relief and said gratefully. Thank you, Captain Aizen. You're welcome. I just hope that you can work hard to improve your strength in the future, guard the white gate well, and prevent such incidents from happening again. Aizen Sosok responded to Icon-saka Shidanfan in a gentle and warm tone, and then turned his eyes to Kurosaki Ichigo again and said. In addition, it's a pity that although I also sympathize with Kachika Rukia's experience, as the captain of the 13th Gotti squad, I can't let you go. At this moment, the image shown by Aizen Sosok, not to mention Icon-saka Shidanfan who made a mistake, even Kurosaki Ichigo and others, who were enemies, subconsciously raised some respect. Almost perfect. This is the first impression that Aizen Sosok gave to Ichigo Kurosaki and others. A man with such a magnanimous demeanor will undoubtedly make people subconsciously feel impressed. If Ichigo Kurosaki and others had not confirmed from the documents in advance that Aizen Sosok's threat level was the highest in the Soul Society, I'm afraid that with Ichigo Kurosaki's personality, he would have subconsciously expressed his goodwill to Aizen Sosok and asked for help. Although Ichigo Kurosaki and others tried their best to hide their emotions, under the gaze of Aizen Sosok, they almost instantly saw through the hearts of Ichigo Kurosaki and others. Are you feeling a strong fear of me? Don't worry, Aizen Sosok pushed his glasses, his eyes swept over Ichigo Kurosaki and others carefully, and then spoke. You haven't really done anything evil that threatens the Seireitei. I will take the initiative to intercede with the Central 46th Chamber on your behalf and ask for you to be safely sent back to the human world. No. Finally, Ichigo Kurosaki, who reacted, took a step forward and spoke firmly. I will never leave before Rukia is rescued. This is a bit difficult. Aizen Sosok scratched his hair with his index finger in a simple and honest manner, and asked helplessly. Can't you seriously consider my advice? At most, I can help you convey a few words to Rukia Kachika who is imprisoned in the Palace of Confession as a farewell. If I can choose, I don't want to have any conflicts with you young men who are in trouble. However, only Makoto Senju can distinguish the dangers in these seemingly honest and kind words. Mentioning Rukia Kachika's situation will undoubtedly stimulate Ichigo Kurosaki to strengthen his belief, and the information that seems to be leaked unintentionally can accurately guide Ichigo Kurosaki to the direction of Rukia Kachika. It's just that Jin who was supposed to appear here in the original trajectory, now appears in person by Aizen Sosok himself. The change, because of my existence, it is undoubtedly a question whether Jin can stop me, so did Aizen Sosok personally create this coincidence? That is to say, Aizen Sosok may not have really prepared some of the arrangements in the Seireitei, and thinks that this is not the best time for Kurosaki Ichigo and others to break into the Seireitei as a travel disaster. So Aizen Sosok's purpose is to delay that time for the travel disasters to break into the Seireitei. Senju Makoto looked at Aizen Sosok standing in the wide gate with a calm expression, and his eyes flashed with a few waves. Aizen Sosok also looked over as if he had sensed something, looking at Senju Makoto standing outside the wide gate. At this moment, with the wide gate as the dividing point, Makoto Senju and Aizen Sosok were both wearing white robes and looking at each other from a distance. Their eyes met and intertwined, and each other's eyes reflected each other's gentle eyes. Suddenly, Ichigo Kurosaki spoke without hesitation, saying firmly, No. No matter what, I must enter the Seireitei. As Ichigo Kurosaki spoke, he slowly raised his zanpakutō Zanjitsu and was about to point it at Aizen Sosok to challenge him, when Makoto Senju took a step across and stood in front of Ichigo Kurosaki. Uncle Kurosaki. Ichigo Kurosaki looked at Makoto Senju's back and said in confusion. Makoto Senju, with his back to Ichigo Kurosaki, spoke with a relaxed tone. Ichigo, this is not an enemy you can handle, so, leave it to me. As soon as these words came out, Kurosaki Ichigo, Ishidori and Nidorai almost instinctively showed opposition on their faces, unwilling to leave Senju Makoto alone to face Aizen Sosok, who had the highest threat level. But, there is no but, you can just go into the Seireitei without worry, I will catch up with you soon. With his hands in his pockets, Senju Makoto walked towards Aizen Sosok step by step, speaking in a gentle and steady tone. Don't worry, I'm here, no one will block you from entering the Seireitei, I say. Chapter 413. First head-on confrontation with Aizen. As soon as Senju Makoto said this, which was almost irrefutable, Ichigo Kurosaki and others struggled for a moment, and then finally became determined. Rick, alright time, let's go, don't track down Uncle Kurosaki, Ichigo Kurosaki said, and took the lead and walking in front and rushed towards the edge of the white path gate and into the Seireitei. Inuyama followed closely behind, and Ishirai was behind to cover the rear. Seeing this, Aizen Sasuke's eyes fell on Ichigo Kurosaki, and a trace of dissatisfaction flashed across his face, and he spoke. Traveling boys, how can you talk to yourself like this? Just as Aizen Sasuke landed, his figure seemed to flash and disappear from the spot in an instant, and suddenly appeared in front of Ichigo Kurosaki, slowly raising his calf as if he was going to kick Ichigo Kurosaki and the other two out of the white path gate. In this instant, Aizen Sasuke showed such a fast speed that neither Kurosaki Ichigo nor Ishirai could react, let alone make any defensive moves. However, just when Aizen Sasuke was about to kick Kurosaki Ichigo, Senju Cheng suddenly appeared on the side of Aizen Sasuke, and also lightly raised his calf to block in front of Kurosaki Ichigo. Bang! During the collision, a dull sound rang out, and a wave of air burst out in a ring. When Kurosaki Ichigo and others reacted, they saw that Aizen Sasuke was still in a stalemate with Senju Cheng, maintaining a wrestling posture in the air. Kurosaki Ichigo, who had been kicked by Senju Cheng countless times during this period, swallowed his saliva, feeling the momentum that was completely different from the combat training. He swallowed his saliva subconsciously and said in a low voice, "Go." Then, Kurosaki Ichigo turned around, went around Senju Cheng's back, and hit behind Aizen Sasuke to continue to go inside the Seireitei. Aizen Sasuke looked at Kurosaki Ichigo and turned his eyes to Senju Cheng in front of him, and said, "You said that? What makes you say such arrogant words?" Senju Cheng smiled gently and replied, "Of course it's strength." The next moment, almost at the moment when Senju Cheng's voice fell, in an instant, Aizen Sasuke burst out with an amazing level of white fighting, and almost in an instant, he attacked 13 vulnerable and fatal parts of Senju Cheng's body at the same time. Bang 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 bang. Under the collision of pieces of after images that could only be seen in Ichikan's Danbo, Senju Cheng and Aizen Sasuke quickly distanced themselves from each other. But compared with Aizen Sasuke, whose captain's Aori seemed to have no more wrinkles, the white coat on Senju Cheng's body undoubtedly had a lot more marks. However, Senju Cheng was not surprised at all. Compared with himself, who was not good at Haikuba, the one in front of him was Aizen Sasuke, who had truly practiced all kinds of Shinigami-related skills to a certain extreme. Even the Haikuba that he had almost never shown in the past, is it really completely comparable to the top level of Shifu Yuan or Ishi? Can we only say that it is Aizen Sasuke? Senju Cheng silently admired Aizen Sasuke's talent in his heart, but on the surface he was quite relaxed. Although he looked a little embarrassed, he was still accurately blocking the direction in which Aizen Sasuke could stop Kurosaki Ichigo and others. Aizen Sasuke's originally gentle and indifferent expression was a little ugly at this moment. He looked at Senju Cheng in front of him with a slightly solemn look and spoke slowly. "I didn't expect that the level you showed in the battle with Hannibal was still hidden, Kurosaki Cheng. Captain Aizen praised me, but the battle with Hannibal was quite dangerous and difficult." Senju Cheng responded with a smile. "In that case, even though I didn't want to draw my sword, I have to act," Aizen Sasuke said helplessly, holding his zanpakutō, Kyuka and slowly pulled it out of the scabbard. At this moment, Senju Cheng already felt that Aizen Sasuke was serious, and behind Senju Cheng, Kurosaki Ichigo and others had not really walked far. Really, Captain Aizen is so strict that he must control everything. If no accidents are allowed to happen, many things will become boring, Senju Cheng responded in a gentle and calm tone, and a spirit bow appeared in his hand. Aizen Sasuke narrowed his eyes, and in a flash he appeared in front of Senju Cheng, and a seemingly ordinary knife swept across Senju Cheng's waist. However, Senju Cheng took a step back at an astonishing speed, dodging the slash, and casually pulled the spirit bow in his hand, and a dazzling spirit arrow condensed out, swoosh. The spirit arrow that was enough to easily penetrate several Uchukas was chopped straight through by Aizen Sasuke without moving his eyes, and he casually raised his knife and approached Senju Cheng again, and spoke in a calm tone. "Not a bad spirit arrow, I'm surprised that there is a queency of your level, it seems that you still need a lot of unexpected things." Senju Cheng answered casually, almost as if dancing on the blade, constantly dodging Aizen Sasuke's attacks at close range, and occasionally returning a spirit arrow. For a moment, the battle between Aizen Sasuke and Senju Cheng seemed to have calmed down in the eyes of Ichikan's Danbo. In addition to the speed being too fast to see clearly, not even a little bit of the aftermath of the battle was leaked. But only Aizen Sasuke and Senju Cheng knew that the reason why there was not even a little bit of the aftermath of the battle was that Aizen Sasuke and Senju Cheng had controlled their strength to the extreme. There is no doubt that at this moment, Aizen Sasuke and Senju Cheng had the same idea, that they did not want to alarm other Shinigami on a larger scale, and both sides were also testing the upper limit of each other's strength. Suddenly, in a staggered passing, Aizen Sasuke, who raised his zanpakutō Kyuka to block Senju Cheng's eyes, said softly, "Break it, Kyuka." However, at this moment, Senju Cheng chose to close his eyes tightly and quickly distanced himself from Aizen Sasuke. This scene undoubtedly made Aizen Sasuke's eyes seem to completely turn cold. The ability of zanpakutō Kyuka, absolute hypnosis, can perfectly control the opponent's 5 senses, but it also has very strict preconditions for activation. And Senju Cheng deliberately avoided witnessing the moment when zanpakutō Kyuka was released, which undoubtedly showed that he had prepared for the ability of zanpakutō Kyuka in advance. "It seems that Urahara Kisute told you a lot of things," Aizen Sasuke said slowly. Senju Cheng, who didn't care about letting Urahara Kisute take more blame, said with a smile, "That's right, so Captain Aizen, do you want to consider handing over the Hoyoku and turning yourself in?" Chapter 414. Aizen Unohana Cheng, turn yourself in. Aizen Sasuke smiled, not the gentle and elegant smile just now, but with a hint of sarcasm and disdain, and answered, "Who else in this world is qualified to judge me? On the contrary, I am very interested in standing in front of the Soul King and asking for some answers." "Soul King? Aizen Sasuke, is your goal the Soul King Palace?" Senju Cheng asked in a serious tone. At this moment, in Aizen Sasuke's eyes, Senju Cheng's identity has undoubtedly been confirmed as Urahara Kisute's collaborator, and he is a quincy who knows a lot of secrets. Whether it is or not, what does it have to do with you quincy who survive in the world? Aizen Sasuke looked at Senju Cheng with pity, pointed his zanpakutō Kyuka at an angle to the ground, pushed his glasses, and asked back, "Or are you also interested in the Soul King Palace?" Senju Cheng's eyes flashed slightly and answered, "After all, it is the place where the person who created the world lives, so there will always be some curiosity." "Really? But curiosity will kill the weak little cat." Originally, Senju Cheng expected that after he showed his ability far beyond that of an ordinary captain, Aizen Sasuke might try to send him a team invitation. Unexpectedly, when Aizen Sasuke lowered his head slightly, his words revealed his arrogance and contempt that could not be concealed. "Just because you believed in Kisute Urahara's one-sided words, do you think you have understood the whole world? Do you think that you can talk to me on an equal footing just because you know the prerequisites for the ability of Kagami Water Moon?" Aizen Sasuke's lenses refracted the light, making it impossible to see the eyes hidden under them. Disdain? Or arrogance? Or indifference? Senju Cheng's mouth curled up slightly, and he felt a little nostalgic in his heart. Yes, even after decades, Aizen-kun's inner character has not changed at all. "Unfortunately, I am no longer myself. I am no longer the vice captain who had to be wary of you everywhere. If that's the case, please don't blame me, Captain Aizen." Senju Cheng's eyes slightly condensed, and then slowly closed his eyes, and the spirit bow in his hand was pulled open. Perhaps, Senju Cheng is undoubtedly truly immune to the ability of zanpakutō Kyuka, whether it is the special spirit particles that are still retained in zanpakutō Kyuka, or the spirit particles of the entire Soul Society can be regarded as part of Senju Cheng in a certain sense. As long as Aizen Sasuke draws his sword in the area where spirit particles exist, it can be regarded as keeping in contact with Senju Cheng. As long as, in order to prevent Aizen Sasuke from associating himself with the name of Senju Cheng in the past, Senju Cheng can only choose this seemingly rigid way to continue fighting with Aizen Sasuke. Of course, in fact, even if Senju Cheng closes his eyes, the spirit particles everywhere around him can still be regarded as Senju Cheng's eyes. Perhaps, since Hyoshogu Ichibane is also in Soul Society, once Makatao Senju uses the power of the name level, he will most likely be instantly detected by Hyoshogu Ichibane. However, even if he only uses the spirit control ability below the name level to disguise himself as a quincy to fight, under the blessing of the ultimate spirit body, Makatao Senju is also very interested in what level of combat power he can achieve. Let Aizen Sasuke, who he once feared very much, be used as a whetstone. Even, Makatao Senju doesn't mind completely killing Aizen Sasuke here, reducing a potential threat, and then launching one of the backup plans. Directly seize the Hoyoku. After that, what Aizen Sosok could do in the original trajectory, Makoto Senju can also easily achieve. In the Huko Mundo, he controlled the Kainiac with overwhelming strength, and then controlled the Kainiac through Synopsis to fight the Seireitei head-on. He could then manipulate a war behind the scenes and take the opportunity to kill the captains of the Gotti 13 who were difficult and suspected to be loyal to the Soul King Palace. By the way, he could continue to train Nichiko Kurosaki and use him as a test subject to continue observing the speculation that made Makoto Senju quite suspicious. Killing intent rose in Makoto Senju's seemingly gentle and calm eyes, and the brilliant spirit arrow condensed in a spirit bow was almost as if it had been completely materialized. Swoosh! When the captain-level battle fluctuations broke out in the direction of the Wide Gate, although the aftermath of the battle was quite weak, it still attracted the attention of a considerable number of Shinigami, who all went to the direction of the Wide Gate to support it. Among them, Unohana Retsu, who was originally heading towards the Wide Gate, almost increased his speed in vain, and even directly left behind Kotetsuin and headed straight for the Wide Gate. Soon, when Unohana Retsu passed the last corner and saw clearly what was happening in front of him, his steps suddenly stopped. The huge body of Ikanzaka Danbo fell to the ground, bleeding profusely, and the whole person was completely out of breath. Compared with Ikanzaka Danbo, who was only a small figure in the entire Seireitei, the other figure nailed to the wall undoubtedly made Unohana Retsu's pupil shrink slightly. The captain of the 5th Division, Aizen Sosok, died in battle. His chest was pierced by a spirit arrow and nailed to the White Road Gate. According to the natural posture of the body and the reaction of the spiritual pressure, the experienced Unohana Retsu could almost certainly determine the death of Aizen Sosok with just one look. In addition, the only one standing on the field was Senju Makoto, who was wearing a white windbreaker and holding a spirit bow in his hand. The next moment, as Senju Makoto subconsciously turned his head, his eyes met with Unohana Retsu's. Makoto. Unohana teacher. The eyes of both parties trembled violently unconsciously. Then, Unohana Retsu walked towards Senju Makoto step by step, but his palm was on the hilt, and he slowly pulled the zanpakutō blade out of the scabbard bit by bit. The bloody killing intent, the bloody spiritual pressure, made Unohana Retsu, who was originally like an elegant and quiet Unohana, seemed to be transformed into a red spider lily growing on a sea of blood and bones. Makoto, you killed Captain Aizen? Have you decided to stand on the opposite side of the Gotti 13? Facing such a terrifying Unohana Retsu, Senju Makoto dispersed the spiritual bow in his hand and said helplessly. Unohana teacher, if I say it's not true, do you believe it? What? Suddenly, Unohana Retsu made a voice that made Senju Makoto feel a little bit cute and disappointed, and said. Is that so? I thought Cheng had made up his mind, so I fought side by side with Cheng in the Jingling Garden and then fell into hell together. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 415R. Falling into Hell? Upon hearing this, Senju Makoto looked at Unohana Retsu and smiled gently, saying, Hell is not allowed to imprison Unohana-sensei, otherwise I might become a traveling disaster of hell. Really? In just a few words, Unohana Retsu, who had almost been unable to suppress his murderous intent, seemed to have regained his usual gentle appearance, gently covering his mouth and smiling, saying, I thought you returned to the Seireitei as a traveling disaster this time just to save that cute little girl, Rukia Kachaki. Ah? Senju Makoto seemed to reveal a bit of slowness on his face, and said belatedly. I obviously wanted to see Unohana-sensei, so I followed her back to the Seireitei with this excuse. In an instant, Senju Makoto vaguely saw that Unohana Retsu's beautiful eyes seemed to brighten a little, and her rosy and attractive lips pursed for a while, and then she spoke. Makoto, you haven't forgotten the consequences of deceiving your teacher, have you? Telling such a lie that can be easily discovered will have serious consequences. Makoto Senju's eyes were so soft that they seemed to melt. He looked at Unohana Retsu in front of him and responded softly. If it was Unohana teacher, no matter what the consequences were, but before Makoto Senju could finish, a piercing scream suddenly echoed around the entire Baidao Gate. Ah! Makoto Senju and Unohana Retsu turned their heads to look in the direction of the scream, and what they saw was the pale and horrified vice-captain of the 5th Division, Mamo Hinamori. This voice completely broke the atmosphere between Makoto Senju and Retsu behind that Bideo gate, and even made more of the surrounding Shinigami start to speed up and rush in this direction. Captain. How could it be? Mama Hinamori stared at Aizen Sasuke, who was nailed to the Bideo gate. Her eyes collapsed and she murmured in despair, and her whole body fell to the ground weakly. Unohana Retsu, who witnessed this scene, turned his head again and looked at Senju Makoto, asking with his eyes conveying information. How to deal with it? Senju Makoto's eyes dropped slightly, and he didn't have time to explain more to Unohana Retsu. He suddenly retreated and distanced himself from Unohana Retsu, and casually pulled the spirit bow to shoot dozens of shots at Unohana Retsu. I'm sorry, Unohana teacher, we haven't seen each other for a long time, but I can only treat you with such rude behavior, Senju Makoto said silently in his heart, and his figure flashed, and almost in an instant, under the cover of those dozens of spirit arrows, he went into the interior of the jingling court and disappeared without a trace. Bang bang bang. Those dozens of spirit arrows looked spectacular, but it was obviously impossible for them to really hurt Unohana Retsu. Unohana Retsu was cooperating with some awkward evasion and blocking, and seemed to be powerless to chase Senju Makoto, while the other death gods also rushed over one after another. The death of Ikenza Kashidanbo and Aizen Sasuke undoubtedly caused an uproar among the Shinigami group in an instant. The invasion of the travel disaster, if it was only the death of Ikenza Kashidanbo as a gatekeeper, it would not be a particularly serious incident. But as one of the 13 captains of the Seireitei and with an extremely good reputation, Captain Aizen Sasuke was nailed to the White Gate in such a provocative way, which almost instantly angered a large number of Shinigami who witnessed this scene. However, in a short period of time, the other captains obviously did not have time to rush to the scene. As the most senior figure among the Shinigami present, Unohana Retsu slowly put his zanpakutō back into the scabbard while commanding the Shinigami to lower Aizen Sasuke's body from the White Gate. Wait. Just when many Shinigami were full of grief and anger and were about to ask Captain Aizen Sasuke to be more respectable, a voice full of anger rang out. Hinamori Mamo's petite body walked past many Shinigami and came straight to Unohana Retsu, questioning loudly. Captain Unohana, what were you doing just now? Why did I see you and Tadashi chatting happily when I arrived at the scene? As soon as these words came out, Unohana Retsu was almost instantly surprised. However, as the captain of the Millennium, Unohana Retsu's status was not something that a small vice captain like Hinamori Mamo, who had just been promoted, could question. Therefore, Unohana Retsu just said it softly and slowly. Vice Captain Hinamori Mamo, did you see something wrong? If you can't accept the reality of grief for a while, you can consider a period of mental intervention treatment in the 4th Division. You are lying. Hinamori Mamo stared with wide eyes, almost subconsciously drew his zanpakutō at Unohana Retsu, and questioned angrily. I clearly saw that you just drew your zanpakutō but didn't fight with that Rinpoche at all. Instead, you are whispering something to each other. It's true. How could Captain Aizen be killed with just Rinpoche's words? You are also a participant. For a moment, as Hinamori Mamo's bold guess sounded, the surrounding Shinigami were all shocked. However, many Shinigami were not suspicious of Unohana Retsu at all, but were shocked that Hinamori Mamo dared to make such a bold and rude guess about Unohana Retsu. And at the same time that Hinamori Mamo drew his zanpakutō, a considerable number of Shinigami, led by the somewhat late Kotetsuya, almost subconsciously drew their zanpakutōs at Hinamori Mamo. The God 13 has its own rules. Without evidence, it is impossible for the vice captain to question the captain so seriously, and even draw their swords directly. When the dispute broke out, in less than a breath, Hinamori Mamo was suppressed and bound by many Shinigami. Alas, Unohana Retsu sighed with sympathy, waved his sleeves, and spoke gently. Send the bodies of Ikenza Kashidanbo and Captain Aizen to the 4th Division. In addition, Vice Captain Mama Hinamori's rash attempt to draw her sword against me, considering that it was an impulsive act under the grief of Captain Aizen's death, I will not pursue it. After a pause, Unohana Retsu squatted in front of Mamo Hinamori with a gentle face, looking at Mamo Hinamori, whose eyes seemed full of anger and hatred. Unohana Retsu's eyes flickered obscurely, thinking secretly. Even though Makoto does not admit that he killed Aizen Sasuke, Mamo Hinamori, as the second eyewitness, has been insisting that it was Makoto who did it. Will it be disadvantageous to Makoto? Thinking of this, Unohana Retsu's eyes dropped slightly. How about, just get rid of Mamo Hinamori? Otherwise, she will keep making a fuss, which is really unpleasant, and it will ruin the rare reunion between Makoto and me. Chapter 416. heading to the endless hell. Thinking of this, Hanaretsu spoke with a bit of pity and sympathy in his gentle eyes. Vice Captain Hinamura seems to have mental problems. Take her to the 4th Division for treatment for the time being. As Hanaretsu, who was the absolute authority in the Kido and medical skills of the Seireitei, said this, Hinamura's questioning and rebuttal seemed to be quite powerless. She was sent to the 4th Division with her mouth blocked. And everything that happened in the Wide Path Gate also caused an uproar in the entire Seireitei. The invasion of the Takedo. The heroes of the gate, Akanza Kashidanbo, and the captain of the 5th Division, Aiden Sosuk, are suspected to have died in the attack of the Takedo. This is undoubtedly a vicious incident that is enough to shake the entire Seireitei. Soon, an emergency order was issued by the Central 46th Office and the 1st Division at the same time. From now on, the Seireitei enters a state of emergency. All the 13th Division of the GOT are to carry their zanpakutō at any time and search for the Tadashi in the entire area. The captains are allowed to release their bankai in the Seireitei. In order to confirm the death of Aizen Sosuk and the fact that Vice Captain Mama Hinamura spread the news due to mental stress, the captains of the 8th Division, the 10th Division, and the 13th Division jointly conducted an investigation. As a result, it was naturally further confirmed that the fatal wound on Aizen Sosuk's body came from the Ritsu arrow, and that Hanaretsu did not have time to attack Aizen Sosuk. As for what Mama Hinamura spread, why did Hanaretsu draw his sword but did not take the initiative to attack Senju Cheng? All the senior captains of the Seireitei understand that they should be thankful that Hanaretsu only drew his sword for defense but did not fully enter the fighting state, otherwise the situation might have become several times worse. And at this moment, when all the Shinigami of the entire GOT 13th Division were in action, Senju Cheng was like a ghost protected by spirit particles, strolling leisurely in the Seireitei without haste, but he could always easily avoid the eyes of all the Shinigami. Senju Cheng was not anxious about the situation on Hanaretsu's side. Although time was tight and there was no time to explain the situation to Hanaretsu, with the invisible tattooed understanding between Senju Cheng and Hanaretsu, Senju Cheng knew that Hanaretsu could handle everything perfectly. Relatively speaking, Senju Cheng knew that the most urgent thing at the moment was to solve the problem of his identity being exposed. The moment Senju Cheng stepped into the Seireitei, there was a person who had definitely confirmed Senju Cheng's identity instantly, that was Zaraki Fire. As the owner of the zanpakutō, Ryoroteku, Zaraki Fire's ability Spirit Phantom allowed him to keep surveillance over the entire Seireitei through the fusion of spirit particles in the past. The only black hole, whether in the past or now, is Senju Cheng. The characteristics of spirit control will undoubtedly make all spirits that come into direct contact with Senju Cheng in a state of submission, and be forced to break away from the fusion of spirit control of Zaraki Fire. Therefore, Senju Cheng can confirm his reappearance, and Zaraki Fire must have guessed it. So, I have to meet you, Fire. Senju Cheng thought silently and went to the entrance of the 8th floor of the Mao underground prison, the infernal hell. For Senju Cheng, who once served as the vice captain of the 4th Division of the GOT 13 for decades and had a very good relationship with each division, he knew almost all the locations in the Seireitei. One of the entrances to the infernal hell is located in the 1st Division where Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni is located. This is why the captain, Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni, is almost always in the 1st Squadron and will not easily leave the 1st Squadron's quarters. One of the reasons is to prevent the entrance to the infernal hell from being destroyed and to release the extremely evil beings imprisoned in the infernal hell. At this moment, for Makoto Senju, anything constructed by spirit particles, as long as it does not have a name, will undoubtedly not be a real obstacle to Makoto Senju. The layers of defense in the 1st Squadron that protect the infernal hell are undoubtedly useless in the eyes of Makoto Senju, allowing Makoto Senju to reach the closed entrance to the infernal hell, the Ghost Path Gate, as if he were taking a leisurely stroll in the garden. Then, Makoto Senju put one hand on the gate and quickly analyzed it through the ability of spiritual particle control, trying to enter the infernal hell without causing any movement. Then, Makoto Senju's eyes fell on several black fonts on the gate, and his brows could not help but frown, muttering something. There are traces of name? Is it the power of Hyoshuga Ichibara? The power left by Hyoshuga Ichibara on it is not an obstacle, but it allows Hyoshuga Ichibara to clearly know the movement of opening and closing the door every time. Really, it seems that I have to change another way, Senju Makoto said helplessly, giving up the idea of entering the infernal hell directly with his body. As soon as he thought about it, he formed a spirit body in the infernal hell on the other side through the gap between the infernal hell and the Seireitei, connecting with the spiritual line. In fact, the infernal hell and the Seireitei are always connected, otherwise, it would be impossible for Zanpakutō, who is in the infernal hell, to merge with the spirits of the entire Seireitei with the ability of spiritual illusion. The next moment, as Senju Cheng transferred part of his consciousness to the spirit body in the infernal hell, what he saw was the seemingly endless darkness in the infernal hell. Then, Senju identified the direction of the weak spiritual pressure of future Zaraki, and walked towards future Zaraki in the darkness. Da, in the quiet and silent hell, the weak footsteps of Senju seemed extremely harsh and clear. As Senju walked to the place where future Zaraki was sealed, future Zaraki, who was bound by layers of seals, slowly opened his eyes and looked at the spirit in front of him that belonged to Senju's true appearance. A smile appeared on his handsome and noble face and he spoke. "Long time no see, Kun." Senju carefully looked at future Zaraki's current state and answered. "Future, I kept you waiting for a long time." "Yes, I really kept me waiting for a long time, Kun." Future Zaraki's tone was always so unhurried and brief. "Several decades ago, after learning of Kun's death, I was sad for a long time. Something unexpected happened, so I had to leave Soul Society for a while," Senju explained briefly, then asked back. "Sour, how about we continue to fulfill our previous agreement at this moment?" Chapter 417. Rational Madman Promise. Zaraki Futea was slightly startled, and his eyes began to fluctuate violently. The spirit that was sealed layer by layer also subconsciously moved towards Senju and asked. "Are you talking about the promise? Is it possible that the promise we made in the past has been fulfilled? The promise to completely wipe out the evil hollows from this world?" Senju stared at Zaraki Futea's eyes, and couldn't help but flash a little helplessness. As early as decades ago, Senju had completely investigated Zaraki Futea's past, and he also completely understood the reason why Zaraki Futea hated hollows so much. Zaraki Futea's past is similar to Iyokiriza, but as a declining noble who lost support, Zaraki Futea did not have the luck of Iyokiriza. He could be protected by Senju and Unohana Retsu, and soon he had the status of a god of death that matched his noble status. The only one who protected future Zaraki was his sister. However, in the end, future Zaraki and his sister were thrown into an arena similar to the one in which they faced imprisoned hollows. In the end, in order to protect future Zaraki's sister was torn into pieces by hollows in front of future Zaraki. Although future Zaraki mastered Bankai directly from the state of no zanpakutō, which was unprecedented under the stimulation of his sister's death, he slaughtered all the nobles and hollows present. But even so, future Zaraki still suffered from regret, anger, and despair for the rest of his life. In Senju speculation, future Zaraki probably wanted to escape that reality and complete his self-salvation, which formed a twisted desire to destroy all hollows at all costs. "Future, Senju spoke slowly, trying to calm future Zaraki's intense emotional fluctuations. "I'm sorry for secretly learning about your past without your permission." Hearing this, Zaraki Futea's eyebrows were still a little excited, and he looked at Senju with doubtful eyes. Senju took 2 steps forward so that both parties could still see each other's eyes clearly in this dark environment, and then said, "I haven't forgotten the promise we made, and I have never stopped my research on spirit particles, but even if all the hollows are finally destroyed, can that really soothe the regret in your heart?" Zaraki Futea's eyes trembled, as if the past that he was most reluctant to look at and dared not look at reappeared in his eyes. It was a bloody and desperate past. A series of shrill and excited laughter, a series of distorted and ugly faces. He and his sister were like toys being watched, being pointed at by those gorgeously dressed nobles, discussing how many hollows they could hold out until they were released, and talking and laughing about the benefits of the bet. One after another, the distorted hollows were gradually released. What came into view were the bloodthirsty and crazy eyes, the interlaced and ferocious sharp teeth, and the pale and desperate masks, but he was so scared that he couldn't even hold the shallow fight that was thrown in front of him. He could only watch his sister who was protecting him kill one hollow after another, and was finally torn into pieces and eaten by the hollows bit by bit. Ah! The delicate face of the Zanpakutō gradually became a little distorted, and bloodshot eyes kept appearing clearly in his eye sockets. The whole person seemed to be breathing heavily, and he let out a scream filled with despair and regret. "Reindeer and pomegranates. Take away the emotions, no. Take away all the extra emotions, it's so painful, my sister, I'm sorry. The Senju father, who seemed to have no emotional fluctuations at all when Senju Cheng first met him, now seemed like a panicked, desperate and regretful child, making incoherent sounds. As for the identity of Seireitei father, as Seireitei father's zanpakutō, the image of Yulu's slowly emerged beside Seireitei father. Although the eyes covered by the black belt could not show any emotion, 2 lines of tears slowly flowed down. I'm sorry, father, but it's meaningless to run away blindly, Yulu murmured, then looked up at Senju Cheng and said. Makoto-kun, father, I'll leave fire to you. Senju Cheng didn't say anything, but just nodded to Yulu. Once, Yulu took the initiative to appear in front of Senju Cheng at the beginning, and provided assistance to Senju Cheng intentionally or unintentionally. Of course, it was not really because Senju Cheng's charm was so great that even his zanpakutō could not resist it. Everything about zanpakutō was born based on the god of death. Everything that Yulu did was for the sake of Seireitei father, hoping that Senju Cheng might one day be able to stop Seireitei father from sliding into the distortion of regret and despair. For Seireitei father, his power might have been awakened that day in the arena, but his heart had died since that day. Even Seireitei father, in order to maintain his spirit and not be overwhelmed by the huge negative emotions, had always automatically separated all the extra emotions and let Yulu bear them, so that he could maintain absolute rationality in a certain sense. However, even the desire pursued by absolute rationality itself is distorted, so what is the difference between it and a rational madman? And in this endless hell, Seireitei father's screams and wails are getting more and more sharp and tragic. Perhaps, Seireitei father's spirit has no injuries, but his heart is undoubtedly suffering the maximum whipping and torture. Especially for the past hundreds of years, Seireitei father has let Yulu bear the impact of negative emotions for himself, which makes Seireitei father's heart fragile in a sense. However, Senju Cheng did not make any move. He just stood silently in front of Seireitei father and spoke gently and slowly. Sire, there is no point in escaping. Escape from the past, escape from reality, escape from yourself. Even the desire to erase all the hollows is not a kind of escape. You think that only in this way can you reduce the burden and regret of your own powerlessness and cowardice in the past, and think that this can make up for your sister a little bit? The gentle voices entered Seireitei father's ears, which was undoubtedly like a hammer hitting Seireitei father's fragile heart. Stop talking. Stop talking. Senju Cheng. In the voice of Seireitei father filled with anger and resistance, it seemed like a helpless young beast making a weak roar, and some of the spirits besides Seireitei father instantly formed sharp blades and stabbed Senju Cheng. Chapter 418 Incurable Disease. Although the seal on Seireitei greatly weakened the power of his zanpakutō, and even though Seireitei was combined with the spirit particles of the entire Seireitei, he could only maintain the level of monitoring and listening, and had no way to escape from the hell. However, this does not mean that Seireitei has no fighting ability in the hell. At that moment, a large number of sharp blades formed beside Seireitei, almost like rain, fell towards Makoto Senju. It's just, Sire, have you forgotten? There is an absolute restraint between my ability and yours in the true sense. Makoto Senju said with a sigh, allowing those sharp blades to fall on him, but almost at the moment when those sharp blades were about to touch Makoto Senju, they quickly dispersed into spirit particles again. If it was the blade of the zanpakutō Yulu's hell itself, Makoto Senju would naturally not be able to instantly control and decompose this spirit particle thing that has the concept of name itself. However, the essence of spirit illusion is undoubtedly a way to control spirit particles by merging with them. How could Seireitei father be a match for Senju Cheng in terms of seizing control of spirit particles? The sharp blades like rain may easily penetrate your case, but for Senju Cheng, it is no different from the breeze blowing on his face. He still looks at Seireitei father with gentle and calm eyes. Seireitei father, who has fallen into the edge of hysteria, stares at Senju Cheng with red eyes, and his tone is both angry and a bit of pleading that he is unwilling to face. Senju Cheng, so the purpose of your coming here is to ridicule me. Go. Go. Hearing this, Senju Cheng couldn't help sighing again. What a good child. How high is his quality? Even at this point, he can resist shouting get out, but expresses his resistance with a go. However, Senju Cheng will never give up because of the other party's resistance, but will only be more excited and focused. The next moment, Senju Cheng took a step forward, put his hands on the shoulders of Seireitei father, stared into Seireitei father's eyes, and said, Father, I won't leave. You haven't been able to break free from the arena until now, but I will definitely take you away from this hell today." After a pause, Senju Cheng looked at Zaraki Fire's eyes, which seemed to be dazed for a moment, and said slowly, "Leave this hell in a new way." You, Zaraki Fire, who seemed to be stunned, stared at Senju Cheng's eyes, his mouth trembled for several breaths, and then he spoke. "Leave? I'm just a cowardly and incompetent guy, what's the point of leaving here? Ha 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 ha, that's right, I can't even protect my sister, and I can't even completely destroy the hollow that killed my sister, where can I go?" Senju Cheng suddenly shouted and questioned. "Sire, are you still deceiving yourself? Was it really a hollow that killed your sister?" The pale and delicate-faced Sire Zaraki stared at Makoto Senju and asked. What do you mean?" The next moment, Makoto Senju gathered his spirit particles in his hand and condensed into a zanpakutō, Synchromansum, which was almost the same as the real thing. Then he held it across Sire Zaraki's neck and asked. "Sire, if I cut off your head with my zanpakutō, was it the zanpakutō that killed you, or was it me holding the zanpakutō who killed you?" As soon as he said this, Sire Zaraki's eyes opened and he fell into a state of complete stagnation. Perhaps this conclusion is quite simple, but for Sire Zaraki, who has been avoiding and not daring to face the reality in his memory for the past hundreds of years, it is no less than a thunderclap in his mind. "My sister was killed by a hollow." "No, it was the nobles who released those hollows," Sire Zaraki muttered, even becoming a little incoherent. "No, it's me, I've dragged my sister down, damn it. The one who should really be damned is Soul Society, the world. The whole world is wrong." Seeing that it seemed that Zaraki Fire was about to fall into a state of madness, and that his stubbornness was getting deeper and deeper, Senju Cheng hurriedly spoke in a gentle voice. "Sire, you are not wrong, it's not you who is wrong. Just like I tried to help you, your sister was also trying her best to protect you who she cherished in the past, and you who have cherished had no faults. Then, who is wrong?" Zaraki Fire asked Senju Cheng blankly, as if he had grabbed the last straw in his heart. "What's wrong is the order," Senju Cheng said gently and firmly. "The world gave birth to us, and the world is not wrong, but the distorted and unfair order established for this world is wrong, and the existence that established this order is also wrong." Seeing that the dull eyes of Zaraki Fire seemed to gradually bloom with light, Senju Cheng continued to speak. "Does Soul Society really need nobles? Of the Shinigami protecting the safety of all souls, the safety of the Seireitei, or the rule of the nobles? Sire, I have treated countless souls, and in the end I found that there is only one disease, and it is a disease that cannot be cured by Kido and medical skills. Do you know what disease it is?" "What disease?" Zaraki Fire asked subconsciously. Senju Cheng said slowly. "That is unfair. Some people, after going through layers of screening, countless fights and trials, are able to enter the Seireitei. But some people are already in the Seireitei when they are born, and in order to obtain the noble status that allows them to live in the Seireitei permanently, countless Shinigami spend their entire lives holding the Gotti and constantly fighting with the hollows, to avoid being deprived of their spiritual power and expelled from the Seireitei after they can no longer perform the duties of Shinigami. There are also nobles who have lost their value and are always on the verge of being deprived of their identities, fearing and struggling. Sire, doesn't the Seireitei look like an unfair cage? A cage where countless souls, countless Shinigami, and countless lower-level nobles are frantically struggling as tools. Outside the cage are even more souls that are not even tools. Those souls can only be regarded as bricks and stones that maintain the stability of Soul Society at best. They can be placed neatly. What does it matter whether they live or die? But among them, how many pairs of brothers and sisters are there who can never be reunited?" These words kept echoing wildly in Zaraki Fire's heart. As an existence that is integrated with the entire Seireitei in a sense, almost everything that happens in Seireitei cannot be hidden from Zaraki Fire. It's just that in the past, Zaraki Fire's vision has always been surrounded by Seireitei, and he doesn't think there is anything wrong with everything that is running in an orderly manner. Until this moment, Zaraki Fire's mind is full of the actions of the nobles. P.S. The weather is getting cold and I have a cold. I'm not in good condition. There are only 2 updates. Please take care of your health, fellow readers. Chapter 419 The Blueprint for the Future. It was because Zaraki Fire knew everything about the nobles and what happened in the Seireitei that he realized that he could not refute Senju Cheng at all. In fact, even Zaraki Fire himself had once proposed a plan to transform a large number of Rukongei residents into anti-hollow weapons to completely eliminate all the hollows. At that moment, driven by hatred and the inertial thinking of being a noble, Zaraki Sawaya had never considered the ideas of those Rukongei residents. That kind of plan was essentially unfair, essentially exploitative, and essentially oppressive, and did not regard the lives of Rukongei residents as equal lives. What was the difference between him and the nobles in the arena audience? What was the difference between him and the hollow who killed his sister? Fear. In an instant, Zaraki Sawaya was refreshed and felt a kind of fear from the bottom of his heart. What on earth was he doing? Zaraki Sawaya subconsciously looked down at his hands, feeling inexplicably strange. What did I do? What's the difference between me and those nobles? Sawaya, at this moment, Senju Cheng suddenly held the palm of Zaraki Sawaya's hand. The warmth that came from it made Zaraki Sawaya's fearful and hesitant heart inexplicably stabilized a little. You are not those scum, and you will never become those scum who only know how to give injustice to others. You just haven't seen yourself clearly, and you haven't found the real wish that you confide for your whole life. Wish? Zaraki Sawaya murmured. Yes, Senju Cheng said gently. According to your heart at this moment, is your wish really to destroy all the hollows? Before Senju Cheng finished speaking, Zaraki Sawaya's eyes, which were originally a little scattered, condensed and interrupted. No, hollows? What is really wrong is the soul society system that oppresses and exploits all souls, and those who really make the rules behind the scenes of soul society, not just the four ancient nobles, but more importantly, when he said this, Zaraki Futaba raised his head and looked straight up at the top of the infernal hell. Seeing this, Senju Cheng slightly raised his lips, knowing that what Zaraki Futaba was looking at was not the Seireitei above the infernal hell, but the Soul King Palace above, as a special existence that is integrated into the entire Seireitei, except for some things that have completely erased their traces in the Seireitei. It is almost impossible to hide it from Zaraki Futaba. Zaraki Futaba may know more about the existence of the Soul King Palace and the existence of the Zero Squad than Senju Cheng. And this is also one of the main purposes of Senju Cheng's trip to the infernal hell, to meet Zaraki Futaba. Senju Cheng didn't want to start a decisive battle with Hyoshuba Wields, so he had to completely destroy the entire Seireitei. In a sense, in Senju Cheng's heart, he tends to regard Soul Society as his homeland. Therefore, Senju Cheng has to consider how to eliminate those who are loyal to the Soul King Palace, or those who obey Hyoshuba Wields, in the Seireitei, so as to try to secretly control the Seireitei. Moreover, from the beginning, Senju Cheng has been dissatisfied with the Seireitei and even the entire Soul Society system. Now, with the great purpose that has to be carried out, it is undoubtedly an opportunity to save the entire Soul Society from corruption and stagnation. And this kind of thing is undoubtedly impossible for Senju Cheng to accomplish alone, and Zaraki Sawaya has become one of the most ideal helps in Senju Cheng's mind. Thinking of this, Senju Cheng said with a hint of ridicule. Sawaya, it seems that the content of the agreement to be fulfilled has to be slightly changed. Zaraki Sawaya raised his thin eyebrows slightly and said, Mr. Cheng, the agreement, maybe it can end here, and I can go on my own. What nonsense are you talking about? Senju Cheng interrupted Zaraki Sawaya, knowing very well what Zaraki Sawaya was thinking at the moment. In Zaraki Sawaya's view, perhaps Senju Cheng saved his past self who was sinking and escaping, and faced his benefactor clearly. However, Zaraki Sawaya, who knew how terrifying and powerful the Soul King Palace was, did not want to implicate Senju Cheng because of his own reasons. Sawaya, I have already said that this time, even if I have to force you, I will save you from the hell no matter what, Senju Cheng said in a gentle voice, as if he was preaching to his own brother. Besides, Sawaya's sister in the past did not abandon you because of danger, so how could I give up our agreement? Don't worry, I know very well what is really behind all these systems. At this point, Senju Cheng's tone suddenly became excited, changing his usual gentle and elegant manner, and pointed upwards and said, The Soul King Palace. It is the high and mighty Soul King Palace. It is the Soul King Palace that has secretly controlled the entire Soul Society for tens of millions of years. But so what? Although the Soul King Palace is high, we may not be unable to reach it. Sooner or later, we will pull the high and mighty Soul King down from the sky and tell him, the world has changed. Sawaya. Senju Cheng seemed to have thought of something, and smiled somewhat wantonly, saying, In fact, I have gradually figured out that studying medicine cannot save the Soul Society. If we want the entire Soul Society to no longer be filled with injustice, the only way is to thoroughly reform it, and if we want to reform it successfully, force is indispensable. Hold the force tightly in your hands, and do not hold any illusions and truly stand on the opposite side of the Soul King Palace. Only then will there be a slight possibility of truly saving the Soul Society. Having said this, Senju Cheng stretched out his palm towards Araki Sawaya and said, "Sawaya, are you willing to try with me to grasp that glimmer of possibility? Let the tragedy that happened to you never happen again in Soul Society." Araki Sawaya stared blankly at Senju Cheng's palm, and felt countless hot blood boiling violently in his chest. Originally, Araki Sawaya's idea was just to escape from the hell, and then personally slaughter all the upper nobles of Soul Society, and then attack the Soul King Palace, and find a way to drag the entire Soul King Palace down with it. And at this moment from Senju Cheng's mouth, Araki Sawaya seemed to see another possibility, not just destruction, but a new life to save the entire Soul Society. A moment later, in the extremely dark hell, Araki Sawaya struggled to resist the suppression of the seal bit by bit, and took the initiative to put his hand on Senju Cheng's palm, and said word by word, "So Senju, I am willing to do my best for the blueprint you have drawn." Chapter 420 Fake Corpse. To Cheng Senju, getting the loyalty of Futei Araki is like a timely help for him. Not to mention that Futei Araki is extremely powerful and dangerous, otherwise the Central 46th Chamber would not have imprisoned Futei Araki in the hell. On the surface, Cheng Senju's ability may be an absolute superior to Futei Araki, but Futei Araki's ability has advantages that Cheng Senju does not have. That is, Cheng Senju may also be able to monitor a small area through spirit particles, but all this needs to be done actively. And just like a person cannot draw a circle with one hand and write out the complete pie with the other hand, Cheng Senju's only consciousness cannot be split into countless parts, and at the same time, he knows everything that happens within a large number of spirit particles. But, Futei Araki can continuously monitor a huge area in all directions. As long as the range of Futei Araki's ability is larger, the range that can be monitored will also increase accordingly, and there is no difficulty that consciousness cannot handle. However, the current problem is that Araki Sawaya is in the seal of the hell, and the ability of zanpakutō is greatly interfered. If you want Araki Sawaya to really play a role, you must find a way to rescue Araki Sawaya from the hell. However, Senju Cheng took the lead and asked Araki Sawaya, "Sawaya, do you know the location of Aizen Sasuke?" In response, Araki Sawaya slowly shook his head and then answered, "But as long as Aizen Sasuke appears within the scope of the Seireitei, he will definitely not escape my perception." Suddenly, Senju Cheng couldn't help but sigh slightly, and everything that happened in the Bidaemon area emerged in his mind. The body taken away by Unohana Retsu was undoubtedly fake. Facing Senju Cheng's gradually rising murderous intent, Aizen Sasuke made a choice that was completely different from the original trajectory, but also somewhat similar. At that moment, Aizen Sasuke killed Iyuken Sakashi Danbo with a gentle smile. In a sense, Aizen Sasuke exchanged positions with Senju Cheng. Senju Cheng was still in the Seireitei, but he retreated directly outside the Seireitei. As the wide gap formed by the murderous stone fell, it also isolated the spiritual pressure perception between the two sides, causing Senju Cheng to temporarily lose Aizen Sasuke's position. Moreover, Aizen Sasuke also left a lifelike illusion of a corpse at the scene. The series of reactions made in that instant made Senju Cheng wonder whether this was also Aizen Sasuke's backup plan. After all, only the dead will not be believed no matter how they are questioned. Therefore, even if Senju Cheng really broke into the Seireitei with some evidence or plan that was completely unfavorable to Aizen Sasuke under the plan of Urahara Kisuke, then in the case that Aizen Sasuke was apparently dead, all the evidence against Aizen Sasuke became a complete joke, and no one would believe those evidences. In one sentence, the gentle Captain Aizen has already sacrificed himself for the Seireitei, and died in your hands. Naturally, Captain Aizen has no way to refute whatever you want to say. Moreover, even the timing of Inamuraimanu's appearance is just right. Forget it. Senju Cheng shook his head, feeling that with Aizen Sasuke's personality, he might not be unprepared for the unstable factor of Araki Sawaya, and turned to speak. No matter where Aizen Sasuke hides, his target will only be one, and he will definitely appear sooner or later. After a pause, Senju Cheng continued to speak to Araki Sawaya. Sawaya, in fact, it is not difficult to remove the seal on your body. Even if you are given enough time, you can do it yourself, but the biggest problem is the seal of the infernal hell itself. At this point, Araki Sawaya has completely understood what Senju Cheng meant. There may be a flow of spirit particles between the infernal hell and the Seireitei, but the layers of ghost seals at the entrance are quite powerful and cumbersome. especially if Seireitei Furuya wants to escape from the interior of the hell. The ghost seal at the entrance must be destroyed. However, the entrance that Senju Cheng knows is inside the barracks of the 1st Squadron, and any movement will directly alert the troublesome Yamamoto Shinigami Shichikuni. Then, after thinking for a while, Seireitei Furuya answered. Senju's map, there is actually another entrance to the hell besides that 1st Squadron, and it is located in the Technology Development Bureau. I understand. Senju Cheng's eyes lit up slightly, and he already had some plans in his mind. Compared with destroying the entrance to the hell in the 1st Squadron, the difficulty of the Technology Development Bureau is much lower. Furuya, then please wait patiently for a little longer. Senju Cheng said. And it seems that he has completely recognized himself and is no longer the evasive attitude of the past. Seireitei Furuya's delicate face also has a little more determination. I'm not anxious, Master Senju. Hundreds of years have passed. A few days won't make a difference. Then, under the gaze of Seireitei, the temporary spirit body constructed by Makoto Senju slowly dissipated, and his consciousness returned to his body. Then, Makoto Senju's figure quickly disappeared in the 1st Squadron's barracks, as if he had never appeared here. However, just as Makoto Senju left the 1st Squadron's barracks, a cloud of smoke suddenly rose from a faraway area in the southwest of the Seireitei. Faintly, Makoto Senju seemed to see the light of the crescent moon sky stripe rushing into the sky. It seems that Ichigo and Rai are playing quite intensely. Makoto Senju roughly sensed the positions of the captains in the Seireitei, and had no intention of going over to support them. In a sense, Makoto Senju, the travel disaster who killed Captain Sosafazan, is the most feared existence in the entire Seireitei. Therefore, before they really figure out Senju Makoto's actions, those veteran captains who have their concerns will not easily go out to avoid being tricked. Therefore, the specific whereabouts of Kurosaki Ichigo and his party, who were not good at hiding, are not only very clear to Senju Makoto at all times and places, but also quite clear to the Seireitei. However, the Seireitei has not really paid attention to a fake Shinigami who has seized the power of Kachika Rukia in the intelligence, a young queency with average spiritual pressure, and a human girl who has nothing special except for the outstanding holy text. Senju Makoto has undoubtedly anticipated this situation, so he led Kurosaki Ichigo and his party to break into the Seireitei head-on. The only accident is that Senju Makoto failed to take the opportunity to really kill Aizen Sasuke. P.S. Unfortunately, my cold has worsened. I am taking medicine. I should be better tomorrow. Chapter 421. I'm back. Of course, it doesn't mean that every captain has a brain full of wisdom, and they will be afraid of Senju Makoto who was hiding in the Seireitei and killed Aizen Sasuke, so they dare not act rashly. The representative figure among them, undoubtedly Kinpachi Seireitei. But, Makoto Senju looked in another direction. Kinpachi Seireitei's spiritual pressure was moving rapidly, but it seemed to be spinning in circles crazily. Captain Seireitei really hasn't made any progress. Can't he still identify the direction of spiritual pressure? Thinking of this, Makoto Senju couldn't help but laugh. However, spiritual pressure sensing is somewhat similar to identifying the direction of smell and sound through smell or hearing. Maybe it can be strengthened through training, but whether it is innate or not is determined by the upper limit. Among them, whether it is Kinpachi Seireitei or Yarai Kusaka, they're undoubtedly abnormally slow in spiritual pressure sensing. Boom. At this moment, Kinpachi Seireitei, who was running all the way in the Seireitei, felt that the surrounding environment seemed to be getting more and more familiar. Yarai, is the direction you pointed really correct? Why do I seem to have walked this place for the 10th time? Shachian, that's right, go left, this time it won't be wrong. Yarai Kusaka, who was lying on Kinpachi Seireitei's back, pointed in a direction confidently and said with interest. Although Kinpachi Seireitei had some doubts in his heart, his body still reacted first, and pounced in the direction pointed by Yarai Kusaka like a beast ready to go. Aha, Raiho, where are you? Come and fight with me. While the entire Seireitei was in chaos, the 4th Division was still in an orderly state. In terms of combat, the members of the 4th Division naturally did not need to intervene. More importantly, since Makoto Senju had already perfected a self-contained medical system in the 4th Division, coupled with various systems that were beneficial to the 4th Division's funds, the 4th Division had sufficient manpower and supplies. In a relatively corner of the 4th Division's barracks, a funeral parlor was located here. The bodies of Icon Sakashi Danbo and Aizen Sasuke were temporarily placed here, and Unohana Retsu was personally conducting an autopsy. Record: Icon Sakashi Danbo had a few wounds on his body. The fatal wound was located in his throat. After comparison, it was found to be caused by the zanpakutō Kukasuijetsu, Aizen Sasuke. The fatal wound was located in his heart. After extracting the remaining spirit particles, it was found to be caused by the spirit particle arrows of the Quincy. No other injuries were found, and as Unohana Retsu examined and dictated the contents to be recorded by Amada, his brows inadvertently frowned slightly. Based on the conclusions drawn from the autopsy so far, it can almost be used as evidence for the Central 46th Office and the 1st Division to roughly infer what happened. When Icon Sakashi Danbo betrayed the Seireitei and opened the White Gate without authorization to let the travelers in, the captain of the 5th Division noticed and tried to stop and kill Icon Sakashi Danbo, but was finally killed by the Quincy Makoto Kurosaki. However, compared to the preliminary conclusions drawn by his eyes and medical skills, Unohana Retsu undoubtedly believed Senju Makoto's words more. If Aizen Sasuke was not killed by Makoto, then what is going on with the current situation? Unohana Retsu's heart flashed with strong doubts. Captain, are these autopsy records going to be submitted to the 1st Division now? Vice Captain Suzube has sent people to work just many times. Yamada Rinka looked at the densely packed autopsy records in her hand and asked. No, I'll sort them out again. However, in the eyes of Yamada Rinka, who was a little puzzled, Unohana Retsu shook her head. This made Yamada Rinka a little puzzled. As the person in charge of the funeral home, in her eyes, the records in her hand that were personally checked by Unohana Retsu are already perfect to the point of impeccability. Rinka, you go and do your work first. Yes, Captain. Yamada Rinka put the notebook aside, bowed slightly and left, leaving Unohana Retsu and Aizen Sasuke's bodies alone in the room. Then, Unohana Retsu's eyes focused on Aizen Sasuke's body in front of him again, and he conducted a detailed inspection again. At the end, his fingers gently pressed around the wound on Aizen Sasuke's chest again. Wait, Unohana Retsu's eyes moved slightly, and his fingers paused, and pressed again. This touch is not right, to be more precise, according to the normal change curve of the spirit of a normal captain-level Shinigami after death, this touch has some extremely subtle differences. At this moment, Senju Makoto's gentle voice sounded behind Unohana Retsu. Unohana teacher, Makoto. Unohana Retsu's serious and puzzled expression suddenly disappeared, and he subconsciously turned around and looked at Senju Makoto, who had temporarily restored his original appearance with tenderness. The next moment, Unohana Retsu seemed to realize his own loss of composure. Looking at the smiling face of Senju Makoto in front of him, he turned his head with a slightly unnatural expression to look at the body of Aizen Sasuke, and spoke in a steady tone. You came at the right time. The change in the touch of Captain Aizen's body after death is somewhat different from what expected. Come and have a look. Oh, Senju Makoto looked past Unohana Retsu and looked at the empty autopsy table behind him. When he walked towards Unohana Retsu with a bit of doubt on his face, just as Senju Makoto passed by Unohana Retsu, he suddenly hugged Unohana Retsu into his arms. This instantaneous change made Unohana Retsu's body instinctively draw the sword almost subconsciously, but after realizing that the person in front of him was Senju Makoto, he suppressed the impulse. But after realizing how offensive and rude this bold disciple, Senju Makoto, had been, Unohana Retsu's body tensed up uncontrollably, and he shouted in a tone that sounded both angry and a little embarrassed. Makoto, are you trying to deceive your teacher by doing this kind of rude behavior? I'm sorry, Senju Makoto's gentle voice reached Unohana Retsu's ears. Unohana teacher, although it's a little late, I kept my promise and came back to see you. Unohana Retsu's eyes trembled slightly, and he turned his head slightly unnaturally, and asked softly in a gentle tone. So you, who have been late to come back, have learned this kind of rude behavior in this world. However, Senju Makoto, facing Unohana Retsu's questioning, seemed to have heard nothing, and still hugged Unohana Retsu tightly, sniffing the faint floral fragrance emanating from Unohana Retsu greedily. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 422 Fake Corpse. When he stayed in the world before, Senju Makoto could still suppress his longing for Unohana Retsu with his tenacious heart, but after returning to the Seireitei, the familiar environment around him, coupled with the quick meeting with Unohana Retsu behind the wide gate, undoubtedly made Senju Makoto's longing for Unohana Retsu completely burst out. Therefore, after a quick meeting with Seireitei, Senju Cheng almost couldn't wait to rush to the 4th Division. However, Senju Cheng's bold move, which was completely different from the past, made Unohana, who had always been in control of the initiative, a little uncomfortable. It's like, just like the obedient disciple in the past, now he wants to turn against Tiangun, openly bullying his master, Makoto. Even if you express your excitement after a long separation, there must be a limit. Finally, Senju Makoto's palms seemed to be inadvertently a little restless, and Unohana, who had lowered his bottom line again and again in front of Senju Makoto, reminded him. And the body of Captain Aizen is still here. With Unohana-retsu's reminder, Senju Makoto also realized that as a funeral home, this place really needs to maintain basic respect and solemnity. Sorry, Unohana teacher, I was a little too excited. Senju Makoto scratched his head, showing a gentle and innocent smile, and said a little embarrassedly. Next time you mess up in the funeral home, don't blame me for punishing you. Unohana scolded Senju Makoto in a rather serious tone, but the eyes that looked at Senju Makoto still showed the unconcealed tenderness and joy. Yes, I know I was wrong. Next time I will never lose the proper etiquette in the funeral home. Senju Makoto responded repeatedly. After Unohana joy, his eyes fell on the body of Aizen Sasuke again and asked. Makoto, what's going on? Talking about business, Senju Makoto's expression became a little serious. As he spoke, he walked to the body of Aizen Sasuke and said. In fact, Unohana teacher should have noticed something wrong, right? This body is fake. As Senju Makoto's voice fell, Senju Makoto condensed a zanpakutō in his hand and stabbed the body in front of him. Puff, a dull sound sounded, and the zanpakutō pierced through the body, but as Senju Makoto pulled out the zanpakutō, there was no blood left on it. Suddenly, Unohana-retsu's beautiful eyes condensed slightly, and then she spoke in confusion. What's going on? I just dissected the body, and blood can be stained around it normally. Because, this body in Unohana teacher's eyes, is an illusion, and this is also the real ability of Aizen Sasuke. At this point, Senju Makoto naturally would not hide this information anymore, and spoke directly. In fact, Aizen Sasuke's ability is not the so-called flowing water type zanpakutō, but an illusion type zanpakutō. The ability of Seireitei is to make all creatures who have seen the release process of Kyuka permanently controlled by his 5 senses. As for the specific way of manipulating the 5 senses, it is to redefine a certain existence in the existence of controlled 5 senses. For example, the corpse in front of you. Kyuka ability is not to create a false corpse, but to manipulate the 5 senses so that all beings who fall into the control of the 5 senses will believe that there is a corpse of Aizen Sasuke. Therefore, whether it is an autopsy or various experiments, it will still follow the illusion of the established existence of Aizen Sasuke's corpse and automatically produce corresponding illusions. Of course, since the illusion itself needs to be defined by Aizen Sasuke, with the subtle differences between the real corpse and the corpse defined by Aizen Sasuke, Unohana-sensei should be able to detect the abnormality sooner or later. Listening to Senju Makoto's explanation, Unohana, who was thoughtful, had a little more sudden realization, but with it came more doubts. Wait, but I'm not the only one who saw Aizen Sasuke's body, but a large number of Shinigami from different squads were also witnesses, unless, at the end, Unohana, who had already thought of a possibility, showed a little surprise in his eyes. That's right, I'm afraid that all the Shinigami in the Seireitei have fallen into Aizen Sasuke's ability to manipulate the 5 senses, but the traveling disasters have not been affected yet. Hearing this, Unohana has completely realized the seriousness of the problem. Aizen Sasuke, what does this man want to do? Unohana said slowly. After a pause, Unohana turned to look at Senju Makoto, who seemed to have become a little strange in front of him. Unlike the seemingly harmless, gentle, kind and humble image in the past, the current Senju Makoto's eyes revealed an undisguised sharp gaze, and even, Unohana saw a hint of ambition in it. Makoto, what is your purpose? Unohana asked so bluntly, and Senju Makoto was suddenly speechless with the several arguments he had prepared in his mind. Staring at the gentle and unchanging eyes of Unohana in front of him, Senju Makoto's mind quickly flashed various scenes between him and Unohana. Alas, Senju Makoto sighed, and finally retreated completely under the gentle eyes of Unohana, and bluntly said the most real thoughts in his heart. Unohana teacher, I have mastered it. When he said this, the materialized spirit wrote the name Hyoshogu Ichibare in front of Unohana. Then Senju Makoto continued to speak. similar and equal in nature, there should be no room for easing between them. Instantly, Unohana completely understood Senju Makoto's current situation from this simple sentence. Perhaps others may not know, but as the first captain of 1,000 years, Unohana was very clear about the history of the entire GOTY 13, and even more so about the situation of the Seireitei 1,000 years ago. The history of the GOTY 13 is only 1,000 years, but the Soul Society is not, the Seireitei is not, and the nobles are not. In the countless years before the GOTY 13, both the Soul Society and the Seireitei were controlled by Hyoshogu Ichibei and the four nobles. In other words, Hyoshogu Ichibei is the real king of the entire Soul Society. Then, Unohana spoke. You shouldn't have rashly returned to the Seireitei. Senju Makoto replied with a smile. There's no way, it's meaningless to just hide. After all, we have to find a way to make some preparations in the Seireitei. P.S. The third update will be a little later. Chapter 423. Are you interested in becoming the captain? Unohana heard this, thought for a moment, and asked in a gentle and calm tone. What is your specific plan next? Unohana teacher, in fact, whether it is me or that guy, although we now have the power that is far beyond the imagination of ordinary Shinigami, and have reached a point that is almost completely interconnected with a certain concept, it does not mean that we are absolutely invincible. Senju Makoto slowly spoke out his conclusion. Although this conclusion was inferred based on the name he mastered, there would not be too much deviation in general. As long as the spiritual pressure reaches a certain level, normal power can also interfere with me and that guy. Therefore, once we are trapped in a siege, even if it is almost impossible for me and that guy to die in the true sense, there must be a way to completely suppress or even seal them. Senju Makoto is quite sure of this conclusion. After all, Senju Makoto is not a newbie who has just become a Shinigami. In the past hundreds of years, he has been secretly collecting various intelligence, and Senju Makoto has long known many secrets including the Soul King. However, the Soul King who was the real creator of Soul Society, Huko Mundo, and the real world in the legend was sealed in the Soul King Palace as a wedge to maintain the stability of the world. Even the Soul King could be sealed, and Senju Makoto did not think that his power could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Soul King who created the world. After hearing this, Unohana completely understood what Senju Makoto meant. If, at this moment, Senju Makoto and Hyoshogu Ichibei might be like the opposing kings in shogi, but the subordinates that both sides can control are in an overwhelming unequal state. This is also the reason why Senju Makoto can only temporarily hide in the real world under the threat of Hyoshogu Ichibei. I understand, Makoto. Unohana nodded, his eyes fell on the zanpakutō in his hand, and said without hesitation. Give me a list, how about I clear the obstacles for you? Unohana unhesitating support touched Makoto Senju's heart. After all, Unohana was not like Zarakisawa, who was more driven by hatred and deceived, so he stood firmly on Makoto Senju's side. Although he knew all the pros and cons and dangers very well, Unohana still chose to stand by his side without hesitation. How could Makoto Senju not be moved? Then, Makoto Senju calmed down and spoke slowly. Mr. Unohana, I have an idea. Are you interested in being the captain? Ah? Unohana was stunned, then smiled and said. Although I have a very high prestige in the Seireitei now, I slaughtered too many nobles 1,000 years ago, and the central 46 chambers will not support me. On the contrary, once Captain Yamamoto, who can really suppress me on the surface, is gone, fear may make them subconsciously think of ways to get rid of me. It doesn't matter, Makoto Senju answered gently and calmly. As long as there are no nobles who oppose the Seireitei, then with Unohana-sensei's qualifications, there won't be any problem, right? Unohana-retsu's eyes slightly raised, but he smelled the smell of blood flowing from Senju Makoto's light tone. No nobles who oppose. Unohana-retsu naturally didn't think that those nobles would be persuaded by words, so there was undoubtedly only one way to prevent the Seireitei from having nobles who oppose him. Makoto, you are really cruel. After all, I am worthy at the name of Unohana-sensei's disciple. After a pause, Senju Makoto continued. Besides, in the duel between kings, a group of small pawns with different positions will be cleared out first, and there is nothing we can do about it. So? Makoto, what are you going to do next? Unohana asked. This Takeda rebellion led by Aizen Sosok might as well be a little more grand, but before that, we have to find a way to blind the eyes of the GOTY 13 and the nobles, Senju Makoto murmured. The conversation that took place in the funeral home was unknown to the existence. Under the stirring of Ichigo Kurosaki and others, the entire Seireitei became more and more chaotic. Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida, who had undergone special training and guidance from Makoto Senju, undoubtedly had combat power far beyond the original trajectory. Not to mention ordinary soldiers, even the chief officer, who was the core combat force of the Gotti 13th Division, could hardly be a match for Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida. And because of the information deliberately revealed by Aizen Sosok before, Ichigo Kurosaki and Ryoshida were moving towards the confession palace where Ukiyo Kachiki was imprisoned with a clear purpose. In fact, Ichigo Kurosaki and his group's actions, which were almost unconcealed, were monitored by the secret mobile team at all times and reported to the 1st Division and the Central 46th Office to ensure that the situation would not get out of control. But, in the captain's room of the 2nd Division, the plump vice-captain of the 2nd Division, Omida Kichiyo, knelt on the tatami with trepidation, reporting the emergency to the captain of the 2nd Division, Soifong, who was sitting in front of her with an increasingly cold expression. Bang! The next moment, Soifong smashed the brush that was originally processing the document in her hand in front of Omida Kichiyo, and asked in an extremely cold tone. "What did you say?" All the secret mobile team members who were monitoring the disaster have lost contact, and no effective information has been sent back. Omida Kichiyo stuck her butt out, quietly moved back a little, and answered. Yes, Captain. How long has it been? I asked you how long it has been since we lost contact. 15 minutes, no, it should be 20 minutes now. Omida Kichiyo answered quickly. Soifong heard this and questioned with a colder face. So, for at least more than 20 minutes, we have no idea what the travelers did specifically. That, those travelers don't know how to hide their spiritual pressure, their location. Shut up, what's the point of just knowing the location of spiritual pressure? If that's the case, what's the point of the secret mobile team? Soifong angrily scolded Omida Kichiyo, and her figure wearing the captain's adori quickly disappeared from the captain's room, heading straight for the location of Kurosaki Ichigo and his party. When Soifong secretly arrived near Kurosaki Ichigo and his party, she quickly identified the location where a member of the secret mobile team was hiding with a casual glance. But, Soifong's figure flashed, and she appeared next to the secret mobile team member, and her cold expression became a little more solemn with a glance. There is no sign of resistance, no, it seems that he didn't even react, and even the hidden disguise was not destroyed. Chapter 424b. After a simple glance, Soifong's cold expression became more solemn. The secret mobile team members may not have much superiority in frontal combat power compared to the other squad members, but they are undoubtedly good at hiding and proficient in instant step. The situation of the secret mobile team members in front of them is not only that the gap in strength between the two sides is too large and they are killed instantly, but more importantly, even the disguise of hiding has not been destroyed. Either the enemy has an exaggerated ability to detect and perceive, or they are very familiar with the style of secret mobile operations. No matter which of these 2 points, it is definitely not good news for Soifong. Could it be that Kurosaki Makoto did it? Soifong's eyes moved, and suddenly seemed to sense something. Her palm quietly placed on the handle of the short sword behind her waist, and her sharp and cold eyes turned around. The next moment, Soifong's petite and slender figure instantly disappeared from the spot, and the zanpakutō on her waist flashed and suddenly pierced into it through a wall. Just as the wall collapsed, a figure in a white windbreaker quickly retreated from it. Found you. Seeing this, Soifong chased after the figure without hesitation. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In a few flashes, they had crossed a very long distance. In the end, as if Soifong was getting closer and closer, the figure in the white windbreaker realized that he could not distance himself and turned his direction in vain, rushing into a forest in Seireitei. Ridiculous little thoughts, Soifong, who claimed to have seen through the thoughts of this behavior, said disdainfully, intending to interfere with the inner thoughts of the figure in front of her, and the whole person followed the figure into the forest without hesitation. Compared with the open team house, the terrain in the forest is undoubtedly much more complicated, and obstacles that may appear at any time will also cause different interferences to the speed. However, after entering the forest, Soifong seemed to be like a fish in water. Compared with the figure in the white windbreaker whose speed had obviously slowed down, Soifong's speed had even increased a lot. In response, Soifong's somewhat cold expression had a hint of mockery. The short knife in her hand flashed a cold light and aimed at the vital part of the figure in front of her. Swoosh! Amid the sound of the figure's sudden acceleration breaking through the air, the short knife seemed to be a very subtle needle behind the tail piercing the heart. However, just as the short knife was about to cut through the white windbreaker in front of him, the figure suddenly squatted down, propped one hand on the tree trunk, and stretched his whole body like a big bow, and kicked Seireitei's particularly slender waist with a whip kick that instantly caused the air to explode. However, Seireitei's skill in fighting by hitting with the knife is undoubtedly the best in the Seireitei. She bends down and kneels to block the attack, perfectly removing the amazing force, while continuing to chop down with the short knife in her other hand. At this moment, the figure's 5 fingers pinched the tree trunk, directly crushing the thick tree trunk that both sides were standing on, causing both sides to lose their leverage points at the first moment. With this instantaneous change, the figure narrowly avoided the short knife attack, and the whole person retreated more than 10 meters and landed on another thick tree trunk. Seireitei, who also landed on a branch, also looked at the face of the person she had been chasing for a long time. "Kurosaki Makoto, it's you," Seireitei said in a cold tone. "Finally, you can't hold back and show up. Then I guess you are ready to atone for the evil of killing Captain Aizen with your life." Facing Seireitei's question, Makoto Senju lowered his head to look at the missing corner of his white windbreaker, and then looked up at Seireitei in front of him. Compared with Seireitei, who was still a little immature decades ago, pretending to be cold in private, but always blushing inadvertently, Seireitei in front of him undoubtedly has a bit more majesty and arrogance belonging to the captain. "Your strength has also improved a lot." Thinking of this, Makoto Senju's eyes unconsciously moved down from Seireitei's face, and then stayed at Seireitei's chest and waist for a moment, and subconsciously added in his heart, "You seem to have grown a lot." However, as the current captain of the 2nd Division and the commander-in-chief of the secret mobile team, how could Seireitei not notice Makoto Senju's scrutiny that was not deliberately concealed? For no reason, between the murderous intent and hostility towards the man in front of him, there was a bit of annoyance. "Sting and kill all enemies, Sparrow." The next moment, with the release words, the short sword held by Seireitei quickly turned into a gorgeous golden finger ring. As for Makoto Senju, although it has not been confirmed how he killed Captain Aizen, Seireitei, as the commander-in-chief of the secret mobile, naturally would not despise him. She directly released his zanpakutō and took a cautious attitude. Then, Seireitei, who inherited the style passed down from generation to generation by the secret mobile, was obviously not a chatterbox like Omida Kichiyo, and disappeared again on the spot, more than 10 meters. There is no doubt that there is no difference between being close to Seireitei in front of her, and in the relevant information recorded by the secret mobile, the way to deal with the Queency is undoubtedly to prevent the opponent from pulling away, thereby limiting the spirit arrows that the Queency clan is best at. Almost in an instant, Seireitei's delicate and cold face was close to Senju Makoto's side. Opposite to her was the zanpakutō, Sparrowfly, which had the ability of 2 hits to kill. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In an instant, in this forest, the 2 figures continued to change at high speed again. However, no matter how Senju Makoto moved, Seireitei seemed to follow him like a shadow. There is no doubt that there seems to be a natural restraint between the 2 sides. As a bowman, the Queency was being closely followed by Seireitei, who was like an assassin. It seemed that a certain result had been determined. Opportunity. During the continuous pursuit, Seireitei looked at Senju Makoto in front of her, who seemed to have no time to dodge this time. A gleam of light flashed in her eyes, and the finger ring on her middle finger stacked towards Senju Makoto's chest without hesitation, trying to leave the B pattern in it. However, ding! A crisp sound rang out, and Seireitei's beautiful eyes widened slightly, looking at the golden finger ring that could not penetrate Senju Makoto's body with some surprise. The finger gloves had pierced through the clothes and pressed against the skin, but they were unable to break through the defensor. Instead, they caused Shattered B's fingers to hurt a little. Chapter 425. How do you know? How could it be? Seireitei's thoughts flashed through her mind, but her actions were not slow at all. She immediately distanced herself from Senju Makoto, which symbolized safety, and then she carefully observed Senju Makoto's condition. On that fair skin, the shapes that looked like blood vessels suddenly became extremely obvious, still blood suit. Thanks to Senju Makoto's battle with Haribal in Karakura town as a Queency, some information about Queency was also turned up again from records from 1,000 years ago. Seireitei recalled a little in her mind, and remembered the record about still blood suit. It was a special ability that the pure-blooded Queency group could use, which injected spirit particles into the blood vessels for combination, thus greatly improving the defense of the relatively weak Queency body. But this degree of hardness is a bit too much. Seireitei hid her right hand behind her back, and while watching Senju Makoto's every move vigilantly, she subconsciously moved her middle finger slightly. Listening to Seireitei's subtle voice, Makoto Senju suppressed the strange vision that was disguised as the silent blood suit and condensed a spirit bow in his hand, saying, "Can't you even withstand this hardness?" As expected, consistent with the information recorded in the intelligence, the zanpakutō of the 2nd Division Captain Seireitei has quite contradictory characteristics. It is extremely lethal but also extremely fragile. The so-called two-hit kill ability is simply impossible to break through the silent blood suit. As soon as Seireitei said this, her face became even colder. This undoubtedly means that the man in front of her seems to have a good understanding of her intelligence, and Seireitei glanced at the surrounding environment, quickly identified her position, and her heart sank. At this moment, Makoto Senju and Seireitei have undoubtedly left the 13th Division Gotti barracks area in the Seireitei, and are instead in a relatively remote forest. Moreover, due to the pursuit of both sides, it is likely that they have also opened up a considerable distance from the subsequent reinforcements. A trap, Seireitei said in a cold tone. What an ignorant and arrogant statement. Do you think that's all that matters? Makoto Senju tilted his head slightly, speaking with a tone of mockery and disdain. What else? What other means do you have? This statement undoubtedly made Seireitei's expression a little ugly. As the captain of the 2nd Division and the commander-in-chief of the secret mobile team, Seireitei's apparent combat power is somewhat weaker than that of the other captains. Moreover, Seireitei's normal fighting method is mostly based on assassination or instant kill. If it is a head-on battle, at this moment, Makoto Senju sprinkled the blue spirit liquid in his hand, which seemed to be concentrated, onto the ground. As the blue spirit liquid touched the ground suddenly showed a queen C formation with unique patterns, directly constructing a bowl-shaped barrier that enveloped Makoto Senju and Seireitei. Makoto Senju spoke with a somewhat cold look. Seireitei. Now the cage for catching hummingbirds is ready. Get ready to die. For a moment, the whole scene seemed to become much more solemn, and a strong killing intent spread. Seireitei looked at the Queen C formation that covered a large area of the forest, and her expression became completely solemn. Although Seireitei had no knowledge of the Queen C formation, just from the appearance, it was enough to judge that it was something similar to the ghost barrier. Trap. There is no doubt that this is a trap prepared from the beginning, and it was intentionally led to this position. Seireitei's heart quickly made a calm judgment of the situation, but a hint of sarcasm appeared at the corner of her mouth as she spoke. Kurosaki Makoto, do you trust the simple information you have learned so much? This so-called birdcage may become your grave. The next moment, Seireitei stretched out her arms horizontally, and white lightning suddenly exploded from her body, destroying her clothes on the surface, revealing Seireitei's streamlined and slender body lines. If you think I'm really not good at frontal combat, then you're wrong. Be grateful. This is an ability that I will not use easily to others, and it also represents my determination to kill you. As Seireitei's last word fell, white lightning completely exploded with Seireitei's shoulders and back as the center, making Seireitei's entire body seem to be covered with dazzling white light. Just standing still, the trees around Seireitei were quickly destroyed by the aftermath of the instant raw state. In this state, Seireitei's expression became even colder, and her head slightly tilted. The next moment, accompanied by a sudden explosion under Seireitei's feet, the whole person suddenly changed from extremely quiet to extremely active. Furious. The white light of Seireitei punched straight at Makoto Senju, and the violent destructive power that was completely inconsistent with that slender fist suddenly erupted, and the aftermath caused the surrounding environment to be almost completely destroyed in an instant, while Seireitei's sharpened cold eyes stared at Makoto Senju's every move, waiting for Makoto Senju to use the stilled blood suit. Although the records left 1,000 years ago fully described the power of the stilled blood suit, Seireitei was extremely convinced that this power developed by the man would never lose to anyone. But, disappeared. In Seireitei's wide eyes, Makoto Kurosaki in front of her actually showed incredible speed to dodge the attack in an instant, and completely disappeared from Seireitei's sight. This scene was almost extremely incredible for Seireitei. As the captain of the Gotti 13 who is now the best at instant step, a mere Queen C actually showed a speed that even he couldn't see clearly. Boom boom, as the original target disappeared, Seireitei's punch was like a bulldozer, instantly destroying a large area of forest in front of her, showing a power that was no less than the level of his zanpakutō's bankai. At this moment, a voice with a little admiration sounded behind Seireitei. Is this instant Boku? It's really amazingly powerful, and it's worthy at being a special fighting technique that perfectly combines Hakuto and Kitten. As soon as these words came out, Seireitei turned her head and stared at Senju Cheng as if she had seen a ghost. Instant Boku. This special fighting technique, from the time Seireitei began to practice to completion, except for that man, she only used it publicly once when she was promoted to captain. It was not a secret information that an ordinary Shinigami might know. As for the nature of Instant Boku, Seireitei had never told anyone. How do you know the name Instant Boku and its principle? End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.